course, since Shiruba is playing the bad cop here, I will have to play the good cop and defend Alvin Knight. I will have to be its defense lawyer.
On this Deltarune survey, over 2,000 people rated what they thought about over 300 Deltarune theories. My co-host and I have ratings along with text responses and old theories just to look back on. Which theories were liked? Why were some theories even made? What did they think about?
Oh, look at this graveyard over all these knights. This is probably one of the most talked about parts of Deltarune with theorizing, you know? Lots of knight theories, even though the game wanted you to believe in one specific thing. And not even that was like fully true. It's complicated. We have a first video for that already. If you want to see us talk about Death Knight and Carol Knight and Crest Knight, that's kind of a separate thing. Chestnut wanted me to do that. I don't know. A lot of people had strong opinions on these theories, so even like the most popular theories will have like spikes in negative ratings, like ones. For this video, we'll first talk about identity theories, like who it is or like what the knight is, and then like mechanical theories, like how are they doing what they're doing, or like motivations. So I hope that's interesting. What do you have to say, Chestnut? I know you really cared about this part.
The knight theories, you know, they're fun to talk about. I think at the end of the day, there's a reason why they were so heavily discussed.
Yeah.
It's because they were fun to talk and argue about. You know, a lot of people tend to take it very seriously, but at the end of the day, I do think, you know, for the most part, this is all just like, you know, kayfabe. It's just like wrestling. You know, it's fake and silly, and like we're making jokes and throwing insults at each other. But really, it's all just for the fun of the game. You know.
Yeah. So let's just start off with the most popular one before we make ourselves through some other ones as well. Multi-Knight, the direction where anyone that creates a fountain is the knight of that dark world. This was the knight theory that did the best. This is also the version of Multi-Knight that did better. And this knight theory wasn't even true, even though it was the most liked one.
This was the most popular Multi-Knight interpretation, right? This is the Multi-Knight that people generally thought of when you mentioned Multi-Knight. And it's the reason why you see so many people being like, oh yeah, Multi-Knight was wrong, even though Multi-Knight was actually literally objectively true.
There was a clear distinction.
Which is why it was two different versions of Multi-Knight on the survey.
Yeah, this is a different one. Basically, the Darkners will just refer to the Fountain Maker as the knight, regardless of who made it. And the summary I wrote just went more in depth into the mechanics of how it worked, or at least how I saw it, because this was one of my top knight theories as well. You have Toby saying that the Fountain definitely changed King on the anniversary stream. Then you also have like Queen changing when the fountain appeared and not the knight, according to what Sweet Cap and Cake said. And Queen, she never even met the knight.
She based it off the knight's actions.
She only had like the video that got recorded, and on that video, one of the texts says that someone made the fountain or something like that. It said someone, not the knight. It's trying to make it clear that, oh, this is just any random person. It's not the knight running around. It's just the person who made that fountain.
A big component of this theory is the fact that in Chapter 1, the Roaring Knight is never referred to as the Roaring Knight, right? They're just referred to as the Knight.
That was
like
one
Sean
aspect.
calls them a strange knight, and so some people even pulled it far enough to be like, okay, so Chapter 1 is the Strange Knight, Chapter 2 is the Roaring Knight, Chapter 3 will be like Chris Knight, which will be different. Maybe they'll have a different title like Silent Knight or something like that.
Yeah, I thought that was a bit silly.
Yeah.
Because they both had the same goal, basically. And they did have the same goal because it was made by the same person.
I mean, even saying this theory is wrong is also somewhat contentious because Susie, you know, makes a fountain and she's a knight, you know? So far, all the characters that have made fountains are knights, right? We got, like, Chris makes a fountain, they're a knight, objectively, and they're making them alongside the Roaring Knight in, like, a duo team-up. But then Susie makes her own fountain for her own reasons, and she's also technically a knight. Her power description is like Dark Knight, so...
Yeah, well, it doesn't fit with what the theory said, which was that the Darkners will refer to the Fountain Maker as the knight because of, like, these mechanics and such. And
that's true.
There are, like, different theories I would use to argue together with this one or whatever, but it's not too important. Just like with Multi-Knight, it's not an issue. It's just more like how you discuss this. Both Multi-Knights, Team Up Knight and Fountain Creator equals Knight, correct. Those are just two different directions, and there are a bunch of different
Yeah.
subcategories you could make within just one. A lot of them that some people seem to do was like, okay, you have the Roaring Knight who's running around, and then there's also Chris who makes the Chapter 3 fountain, who is separate for that. And a lot of people would be like, Chris is not the knight, but they're a knight. You know, that was a thing that was brought up a lot.
I saw that comment hundreds of times, right?
Yes.
So yeah, which highlights how popular this like interpretation and reading of the text was. You know, a lot of people would say that it's like, yeah, Chris is a knight, but they're not the knight, which is just their way of saying they don't believe in Chris Knight, which is just
that's actually kind of funny in retrospect.
It's just added nothing to the conversation. It's just like, well, I always wonder, it's like, what the fuck do you actually mean by that? Like, what are you trying to like convey with that comment you left on my video? You know,
when you put it like that, yeah, I can understand. Anyways, my multi-knight theory. Well, there are multiple ones. We'll get to one later. But my multi-knight theory, that was the best one. Obviously, Chris, Susie, and Noelle are the three knights, fountain makers. I could have put it here in this category, but like people were also asked about who made which fountains, so you could basically just pick out the characters I believed in would make fountains for those fountains. And I also put the core of the theory that expands it to that in a different category, that Gaster knows who'll enter and make dark fountains based on the Goner maker names. Basically.
You want to talk about that now?
No, it comes later, technically.
Okay, then let's save that for later then.
Well, I'll briefly mention it because it's a good theory. It's the best one.
Okay.
And it was true, basically.
It was, but we can talk about that when we get to that on the graph. I really want to go over that list of like what people put for who they thought was going to make in the individual fountain, because I feel like you can get a lot of like insight in regards to what people like actually thought regarding who made what fountain, right? And how popular each knight theory really was, even disregarding multi-knight.
Yeah, this was being asked right after multi-knight though, but you could easily just pick the same person for all of them. Though on the first one on Grand Fountain, Gaster won on that one pretty well. He never gets that high again.
Yes, of course, because I do want to like highlight this because it really highlights how popular like Gaster made Ralsei and like the Grand Fountain theory is, right? Because Gaster's over here with a whopping 36% of the vote, which is huge. And like new character is like number 2, Alvin's number 3. Gerson is like right below Alvin, and then you got Chris below that, and then the Vessel. Point is, Gaster won the vote, which is not surprising, which really highlights how popular that theory was. Never liked that theory. I don't know if it's gotten less popular. I feel like it probably has. I feel like more people are now on the like Chris or the Knight made the Grand Fountain theory. At least, I think it's like at least gained popularity. I don't know by how much. I don't think it's necessarily overtaken Gaster. I still think that's probably the most popular theory. I feel like people just don't talk about it as much now for some reason.
Yeah.
Even though it feels like it's way more important in terms of the overall discussion at this point.
Yeah. Gerson's number 4. I think it's probably because of like how he wrote his books or whatever.
Gerson being popular, I remember because that was like a theory. I remember there was like a whole theory video and stuff about it. I remember this was like a somewhat popular theory, with the idea of like, oh well, it's a closet connected to his classroom, therefore he made the fountain, and that's where he got the inspiration for his books from.
Yeah.
That was the theory.
I don't know. Maybe does that work?
No, because he got the inspiration from his books from reading the Bible.
The prophecy. But the prophecy does literally happen in the Dark Worlds, so it is a little funny.
Yes, it's very that whole prophecy is very self-fulfilling. No, so this was like an interesting insight, right, into what people thought regarding the Grand Fountain and stuff.
The next one, though, Chapter 1, though, Alvin fucking wins there.
With 30% of the vote, right?
Yeah, we're gonna get to Alvin later.
Right, this is both half because Alvin Knight is super popular, and then also half because of 7 Days, 7 Nights. And we'll talk about both of those later, of course.
Yeah.
Chris Knight at number 2 at 14%. And then, for some reason, new character at 12%, which is, like, absurd to me. Like, what do you mean new character at 12%? Even under multi-knight, that's, like, really stupid. Like, what are you talking about? How did that get that high of a vote?
I don't know. People were like, oh, stop overanalyzing the game. It could just be a new character.
Yeah. Papyrus is above Death. Papyrus is above Death.
Oh, killing myself right now.
Yeah.
This
To
isn't
me,
even-
this graph really highlights how, like, silly Knight theories got, right? The correct answer, assuming that Chris didn't make the chapter 1 fountain, is near the bottom, like below Papyrus. And the number 1 pick at 30% is Alvin.
Yeah.
For who made the chapter 1 fountain.
It's weirder
But you
on
know, he did sign the Dark World. He did sign that Dark World.
We can talk about that later. I don't want to talk about
Yeah.
that too much.
Okay, we'll talk more about Alvin later, but yes.
On chapter 2, though, the same stuff with 7 Days, 7 Nights happens again. Miss Boom on number 2. Chris is on number 1, though, for some reason. That's actually kind of surprising. I think it's because there were also believers of Alvin Knight and 7 Days, 7 Nights, so they kind of built up to just
being higher on the Card Kingdom.
basically, but not here.
I do
Oh my
think
God.
to a degree there was a lot of people who were filling out this poll specifically with multi-knight in mind and not necessarily just who they thought the knight was,
Yeah.
which is what they were like supposed to fill it out.
But the question does just ask, which character do you think could have made the chapter 2 fountain, you know? It's really simple as that.
Which the fact that Miss Boom got 15% of the vote really highlights just how massive an influence 7 Days, 7 Nights had over the community, right?
Yeah.
Because that's crazy that Miss Boom, a character that was referred to with a single line of dialogue, got 15% of the vote, who people thought made the chapter 2 fountain. That's crazy. Again, Des is behind both Papyrus, the Vessel, Alvin, Miss Boom, and the Mayor.
Even the mayor! It's so weird.
Even though Des was the only other character besides Chris that had any evidence to support the idea that they made that fountain.
Yeah. At the end, people were also asked, like, which characters do you think will make a fountain at some point? I included Chris here, even though Chris already made a fountain, so it's, I don't know, it's a little redundant, but
Yeah,
whatever.
I guess the idea is Chris will make another fountain in the future, which, yeah.
But hey, it's a cool thing they thought that, I guess. Noelle and Susie, they are on top. They are on top indeed. And obviously, they will make fountains.
I do think this highlights both how people thought who they thought the knight was, and also just how they thought the story would go in terms of like the narrative.
Yeah.
Well, obviously being the number 1 pick, like that's also both a 7 Days, 7 Nights thing, but that was also just a general community thing.
Yeah.
I said that before 7 Days, 7 Nights did. I was like, oh yeah, Noelle's definitely gonna make like the chapter 7 fountain for sure.
I did that too.
Yep,
I said the same thing about Susie before. I said the same thing about Susie before.
That was just kind of
video.
like a, that's true as well. And that was just kind of like a popular idea within the fandom because of how chapter 2 really set up the idea of Noelle making a fountain in the future.
Yeah, with Rudy. People thought she would eventually cause the roaring and such. Whoa, spooky.
New
and then
character
Gaster's
is
there.
above Death, right?
Oh my god. Gaster, Alvin. Wait, Astra. Oh, right, because of fucking 7 Days, 7 Nights.
Yeah. And then another thing is like we got Miss Boom here only at 5% with only like 132 votes, despite like how the previous thing had her at like the number 2 pick for chapter 2 fountain.
Damn, that's
the
weird.
fact that she's so high, still kind of crazy to think about, you know?
Yeah, pizza pants. that was
also a 7 Days, 7 Nights thing.
Yeah, shouldn't that be higher than Miss Boom because Miss Boom has already made the fountain, you know? Or maybe people thought this was like referring to all the chapters and those other questions.
It's asking which character do you think will make a fountain at some point, as in some point as in has already happened in the story. So yeah, that's
Maybe,
explain why
I don't
Chris
know.
was so high.
Maybe, I don't know.
Of course, you were allowed to put in multiple answers for this one, yeah?
Yeah, you were allowed to put in multiple answers for this.
Surprised Chris didn't get 100% of the vote then.
No, but they had already made the fountain.
Yeah, but like some people would obviously intuit that as counting. I guess they were thinking like both we'll make a fountain or be revealed to have made a fountain in the past. So I guess that would both count, right?
Yeah. 7 Days, 7 Nights. So we kind of just have to talk about this one before we go into all the other night theories.
Because it falls under multi-night.
The ratings for this one are super flat. It kind of has a bunch of ones, but it also kind of bumps a little bit up on 5 and also 7. This is a weird chart.
A lot of people gave it 7 for 7 Days, 7 Nights, which I think is fair. I don't know. I guess I'd probably also give it a 7 out of 10, both back when it was around and also in retrospect, because that's kind of how right it was.
I gave it a
3. So 7 Days, 7 Nights was essentially the theory that each dark fountain will have a unique knight, and that each fountain will be made by a different person. Like that was the theory. There was actually 2 different videos for this theory. Yeah. Soph made her video, and then a little bit later, Cammy Boy G made his video, and Cammy's video was like got super popular, did really well, and was really liked across the community.
Oh, okay.
I would often get comments from people just randomly on my videos and be like, I really liked Cammy Boy G's 7 Days 7 Nights video, and I'm like, what does that have to do with my video? Why are you saying that on my video?
Yeah, people are still doing that on
random.
the videos. Theory sermon video we're doing. Cammy Boy G is a cool guy. From what I've talked with him, his pet raccoon is cool. But these kids, man, just mention Andrew Cunningham. Where are the comments about Andrew Cunningham? I don't know. I just want a little bit more than just comments about that. I can understand wanting to talk about something you like. It's cool, but I don't want my small videos to be judged by a bunch of fans of a bigger man and what they heard them say, and discussion is obviously important and very healthy, but a lot of comments on the Roundsay videos are just referencing someone else's video when this is such a small channel. I want a little bit more than that, but you know, Cammy Boy G is cool. I want it to stand on its own. I don't know, does that make sense?
Anyway, sure. Anyway, what the theory is, Cammy Boy G's version, which is like the most popular version, was the theory that Alvin made chapter 1, Miss Boom made chapter 2, Chris will make chapter 3, Susie will make chapter 4, with Asgore make chapter 5, Pizza Pants makes chapter 6, and then Noelle makes chapter 7. Yeah. I think Cammy did just copy my chapter 7 theory wholesale, like essentially, because he did in his 7 Days 7 Nights video. It is identical to my chapter 7 prediction that I put out in my video like a year before his came out. And I know he watches my stuff.
I watched your stuff.
It's not like a problem.
And I've copied you.
No, it's not like a problem or anything. I just pointing it out that my chapter 7 prediction was like the same in regards to like Noelle making the fountain, and that's kind of like why I do somewhat like the theory. Obviously, it wasn't correct, but it did get decently close in the sense that there's multiple knights and there's multiple people making the fountains. Asgore might make the chapter 5 fountain. That's definitely a very viable possibility, and I definitely think Noelle is pretty likely to make the chapter 7 fountain. Right, I'll be really surprised if that doesn't happen at this point.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, the theory's pretty decent overall. In terms of the negative sides, there was definitely a couple parts of it where it's just like, well, that's like nonsense. There's no way that's ever going to happen, right?
With the Pizza Pants one.
Like a Pizza Pants is at least like a fun idea.
Yeah.
Have fun with. The Miss Boom one is just kind of like, what are we doing here? Come on.
It's a good video with good personality and editing, you know, and that can do a lot to just push a video because, you know, compared to Jar's videos are just glorified slideshows, and, you know, I don't think his, whoa, I'm going crazy persona is really for everyone. It really isn't, considering how people view his theories. But personally, I find the theory to be kind of a bit insane. By multi-night standards, it goes a bit too far. It's like, let's just have a different one for every single chapter.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it's like, okay, 7 Days 7 Nights, probably not right. However, 5 days 5 nights, 7 chapters, that seems possible still. I will say though, I always kind of felt like this theory is not like, it's not terrible, but it also definitely felt like it made Deltarune into Persona. It really just like, hey, what if Deltarune was Persona 5, right? That's what it feels like. Which, like, it's like, yeah, Deltarune is very similar to Persona, like 4 and 5 and stuff, I would say. It did feel a little too, like, close to Persona for me.
I guess the Susie part was right.
To a degree,
I don't think the Asgard part is going to be right. I really don't think so.
I do agree that I think Chris is more likely to make the fountain, but I'm definitely
taking Asgore off
the table.
Do you remember, like, the part about, like, the scrapped opening and how, like, the knight on top of the stairs was, like, Asgore, like, in that opening or whatever? Remember that?
Yeah, that's weird. The argument that Cammy made to try and, like, ignore the scrapped opening. That was, like, a thing with, like, multi-night theories, is that a lot of people would argue that, like, oh, well, any version of multi-night can't be true because of the scrapped anime intro. We still ended up getting multi-night because as long as we have a primary roaring knight, which is death, the whole thing can still work. That intro doesn't actually work conceptually, and there's a reason why it was like scrapped still. I mean, can you even imagine it? It would be like the most spoilery shit ever. Like, imagine being like, okay, here's King, Queen, Tenna. Oh, so here's a Titan, and now here's like Asgore. Assumingly.
I know you had a theory that the Titan wasn't even the original final boss there.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's
Mhm.
another thing, is, like, the intro was, like, conceptualized so
Yeah, very
early.
early. And it was scrapped.
But he probably
So why
did
is it
not
being used as
have.
evidence? It's scrapped, you know?
Yeah, it's yeah, dumb. It was conceptualized so early that Toby probably hadn't had the plot and like the all of the bosses locked in yet.
Yeah.
You know?
Cammy
Okay.
Boy G wasn't even this wasn't even like their top pick. It was literally just Chris Knight.
That's
too.
another true. It's like Cammy has
It's
said.
so weird.
That
They
like
just
he just made
made
this to have
they were
a
just
fun, unique
yeah.
theory. Yeah, it's like it's funny that like Cammy like made this as like just a fun idea. It wasn't like his actual #1 pick, right? Like Soft beat him to it, you know?
Wasn't Cammy Boy G's video was the better view wise though.
It did
Yeah.
much better. It's just funny because it's like he made it to be like unique and different, original, and by
Yeah.
the time it came out, somebody had already posted the exact same idea already.
By the Soft. Rudy Knight. What if Rudy is pretending to be sick? It would be the perfect cover up. He could go out at night making the fountains when nobody is watching. Queen wanted to make Noelle the new Knight, maybe because, you know, she looks like the Knight and stuff like that or whatever. And this is not a theory that I actually want to talk about. Now, this is considered more, so we kind of have to talk about it. People were treating him as a joke back then based on like text responses. He's dying, he's sick, he's on his deathbed. My favorite text response that was sent was, "I am the Knight. Flatline beep. Beep." People did not like this back then. They got a bunch of ones.
Yes. In the Happy 2 Days, Rudy Knight was a 1 out of 10 Knight theory. Nobody believed it. One person made like one video on it just for the sake of saying it because nobody else was talking about it.
Yeah, I saw that video too.
But now, because the identity of the Knight has been narrowed down to just the holidays, people have decided that somehow makes Rudy Knight a decent candidate.
It's not.
My argument against that is if he was a 1 out of 10 Knight candidate back in the Chapter 2 days, there is nothing in the new chapters that is going to change that.
Nothing, yeah.
He's still a 1 out of 10 now.
Yeah, it still sucks. It's still stupid. Watch Squid Game. Squid Game. It's stupid.
Work.
The reason why people even believe in it to begin with is mostly just because of like rage bait and YouTube clickbait. You know, people are trying to make like the most outrageous, insane theory for like clicks, and then those get a bunch of views, even though they don't even actually believe in them. And then some stupid people will be like, "Whoa, that's like interesting." And then you also have like contrarians who are like, "Oh, Death Knight is too obvious." You know, that's enough to trick people that can't read. You know, also because they're sexist. They don't like women. They don't want a woman to be an important character. Des or even Carol.
A lot of it is just a matter of trying to perpetuate the Chapter 2 Knight theory debate, right?
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, we have to keep debating. And I was like, no, it's just us. You don't have to fight anymore. The war's over. If you wanted to fight about this, you should have been here 2 years ago.
Yeah. I don't want the Roaring Knight to be anyone but Des. You know, I feel like that's the most simple thing. You know, if it's anyone else, then I feel like it could just make whatever red herrings we have before worse, because, you know, I feel like people just saw the solo Chris Knight debunk at like face value, and then they tried to make like imagine a new red herring, and because people are like, oh, people thought it was Chris, and then it wasn't Chris. Guess we gotta do it again, but extreme, you know? Like, this red herring didn't lead to absolutely nothing. Chris is still working with the Knight, like we've talked about, and working against the player and the Fun Gang and the Triple Tracy stuff. You have the setup of, like, Chris and Des having a relationship when they were younger, and it's also, like, working parallel with the whole subverting chapter formula. The game is, like, safe, predictable enough with the chapter structure, and, like, even similarities to Undertale, and then it kind of rips that out with the tonal shift at the end of chapter 3. You know, there's a reason people say that Chris Knighters were right about Chris's character, because, you know, you were supposed to kind of take it at face value, and, you know, Chris was working with the Knight. So there's much more to it than just subversion for subversion's sake, you know? Like, don't you agree with it's more than just like a shocking red herring for the sake of it?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't know, I just wrote a lot of notes here. It's like someone seeing a plot twist and then only seeing like the emotional reaction of it instead of just all the foreshadowing and such, you know? People kind of trim it down to just it being like all your theories are wrong and it just being shocking for the sake of it. I wrote this in my notes and
It didn't say it. But this is also pretty similar to how some people have been looking at the 7th episode of the Amazing Digital Circus. Its main goal is not to disprove theories. Its main goal is to focus in on the character's reaction to like the situation they're in, of like the adventures just being fake, honing in on like the premise of the show way more than it has done before. If you focus on just like trying to debunk theories and stuff, then you'll just end up with something like Hello Neighbor, which you don't want.
It's more than just that, I feel. There are a lot of moving pieces here. I do still feel like the game is a little smug, though, because, you know, you have the Carol red herring. I'm not gonna fall for that. I'm not being fooled by that, Toby. If you think it's Rudy or Asriel or something, good for you, I guess, but I just want to analyze a game that I think is going to be good, because I like the game, and I want to continue to like the game, you know?
Asriel Knight. What if Deltarune was just Undertale again?
Well, they had like Asriel had a sibling there, and they have a sibling again. So I guess we got to do the same plot again. Isn't that cool?
If the holidays didn't exist, right?
Oh.
This would be like reasonable.
Don't say that.
This was like, I think the funny thought about this is that like the lore information we get regarding Chris and Das's relationship and how the Dark Worlds are based off of the games they used to play, that actually lines up very similarly to like game theory's old chapter 1 Deltarune theory.
Yeah.
That it was like Chris and Asriel.
Yeah, it was more of a chapter 1 theory. It kind of was.
Yeah, that was a chapter 1 theory. And it's crazy to think about because that's just kind of like true, but with Des, again, it's the same as like with Sans' Nest, right? Getting it right, but getting like one detail off, right?
And then also Digital Circus. He was like, Pomni is Jesus and some other shit like that. And now people are like, oh, this was right or something. I don't know.
I think, I didn't watch that video, but like I think
I didn't watch it either.
I think I saw like a half a clip of it.
Yeah, I saw like half a clip too.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just, I guess some people still kind of believe in it now. That's not the
Only thing.
We're keeping it in because it did guess some things right if you look back at like the chapter 1 version. But yeah, this is still a theory for some if you're very contrarian, you know? You want it to be like epic subversion for subversion's sake, you know? I just talked about how that's stupid and wrong. There's more to it than just subversion for subversion's sake, you know?
Well, they argue Asriel because A, they completely misinterpret Chris and Dus's relationship, and then B, they argue that the knight is wearing a helmet, and therefore they can't put the helmet on because of the antlers, so that the antler parts are actually just spikes on the actual horn part of the helmet.
But the knight can shapeshift. The knight can shapeshift.
It's dumb. Yeah. It makes no sense. Clearly just us as like a Titan thing.
Why do people want this? Why do people want this stupid shit?
Because they hate women. This one is unironically that they hate women.
Yeah, this one even worse. This one might be worse than Rudy Knight, yeah. Because Des is already Asriel too. It's a girl and they're this lost sibling. It's like Mother 3 again. It's just Mother 3 again, just like Undertale.
Can we just talk about the real knight theories now that people actually considered?
Yeah. Okay. Alvin Knight. Whoa. This is one of the biggest knight theories for some reason.
Yes.
Look at those
ratings. This was one of the most popular knight theories, like top 3 at least. Like this was Chris Knight's main rival, really.
Yeah.
Right?
It is one of the knight theories with the most 6 through 8s. And this guy was literally an NPC. Literally just a random NPC. I've alluded to it a couple times throughout all those other videos. But this
theory
is dog shit. It sucks. It's terrible. I don't know. It's insane to me that this theory got this popular. This is basically what Gaster deniers think Gaster is what Alvin is. That is exactly what Alvin is. He's just some random guy. He might be involved in the conspiracy. Maybe not. It's kind of 50-50 on that.
Yes.
He was just a fucking nothing character. This theory is not as smart as it thinks it is.
Alvin Knight is like definitely one of the funniest Knight theories to look back on.
Yeah.
Especially with all the Alvin Knight memes and stuff that people made and the
Yeah.
Alvin Knight propaganda. Of course, since Shiruba's playing the bad cop here, I will have to play the good cop and defend Alvin Knight. I will have to be its defense lawyer.
No! You're not supposed
And
to.
hey, I will defend Alvin Knight a little bit, only because
didn't even
you're
like the
doing
theory.
the prosecution. Hey,
didn't even
just
like the
because
theory.
I don't have to believe my client is innocent to defend them in law, in the court of law.
Shoot you to death.
No, I'm gonna play defense for Alvin Knight a little bit here because I do understand why it became so popular to a degree.
I know.
There was the huge anti-Chris Knight movement. Because obviously that was built around the idea of, hey, we want to theorize about Knight candidates. First, we have to kill Chris Knight in order to do that. And then because of that, because people went out of the way to try and kill Chris Knight within like the first week of Chapter 2 coming out, a bunch of other Knight theories sprouted up, and Alvin Knight was one of the most popular ones. Very quickly, I remember this, primarily because Alvin has like this sus dialogue in Chapter 2 where he's like, is it right for this hammer to? And that immediately made people be like, oh, well, Alvin's using the hammer to make fountains, right? Completely, I'm gonna have to dock the Alvin Knighters on this one because like that argument, which they did make, it was their argument, right? They will try to deny that and say, no, we came up with something better later. It's like, okay, but your initial argument was that. And also, that's nonsense because Queen said the knight used the knife to make the fountains.
Yeah.
So many Alviniters just ignore that point.
Yeah, it's her only frame of reference for how a fountain is made, you know?
Yes. Now, to be fair in the Alvinite's credit, Alvin also did have a meaningful connection to the Chapter 1 Dark World, with the Chapter 1 Dark World being in Gerson's old classroom. So, with that point of connection, and Alvin being kind of sus in Chapter 2, that kind of made like Alvinite a more popular theory. One other big component of this is that there really wasn't any other good candidates besides Chris, to an extent, right? Because it's like every other candidate. Well, yes, but I'm getting to that. But like every other candidate kind of has like either A, they're an Undertale character, right? So you can like write them off the list immediately because of that. Or B, they just don't even appear on screen or like meaningfully within the story or the town. Because it's like all the other Knight candidates are like, okay, Vessel, you see them at the start of the game, but then they get discarded, and there's a whole bunch of stuff regarding that.
Yeah.
And with like a mayor, she doesn't actually appear on screen. We don't even get a name for her. Deaths also only gets mentioned, doesn't appear on screen. She's like mysterious, and there's a bunch of other, the whole Final Oscar stuff like that.
But her scene is mandatory. Yes. But Alvin, not even mandatory. You have to fucking go out. 3 people literally on the survey that I can find. 3 people asked who even was. Like, who was he? They didn't even know who he was. That shows how the theory fucking sucks. Because people are just gonna be like, huh? Who is this? At the reveal, it's gonna be dumb.
Yeah, because of all of that, Alvin shot up in popularity because he was like one of the only viable candidates to begin with, and especially one of the only ones that even appears in the game at all, right? On screen, at least. Especially with how Chapter 2 really set up the idea that the knight was simply just a normal person in the town, right? Because that really is how Queen like set up the knight to be like. So that's what people were theorizing around, especially with Chris also opening the fountain and Chris Knight being like, you know, the primary candidate. Again, another just normal person around town. Of course, there was also like the glaring counter arguments that that a lot of detractors like you and I kind of like made him not really worth considering.
No character icon, no character portrait, no mention in the Garner Maker, none of that.
Yes,
and apparently he's supposed to be the big fucking villain of the fucking game. It's dumb. This is literally just a bullshit out of like Zootopia or Big Hero 6. It's dumb, you know? It's exactly what that kind of twist is. It's very disingenuous and very dishonest and dumb.
It's very goofy to think about.
You should have set up for this.
It's impossible for me to like think about Alvin Knight and not immediately think of the ProZD video where it's like, it was me, Johnson Smith.
Yeah.
Who? He's Johnson Smith, the CEO from the beginning of the movie, remember? Oh, yeah. What's his name again? He's Johnson Smith.
I love that guy.
It's a guy. Yeah. Yeah. He's just so... Alvin Knight conceptually is just so goofy when you actually think about it. The dude has like no aura, but Alvin Knighters tried to like try to gas him up so hard. Please insert the very goofy Alvin Knight propaganda gifs.
I remember people saying like, he wants to make his father proud. Do it for his father. He's daddy. And then he didn't have the will to write. He should write though, but he didn't have the will to do it.
I suppose the Alvin Knighters were able to understand the character enough to a degree that it was pretty close to the Alvin Gerson subplot we actually did get in chapter 4, because that was a thing. However, I'm going to argue that they don't deserve credit for any of that, because I was saying that shit myself. I was the one actually being like, Alvin's dialogue is just set up for Gerson in chapter 4.
Yeah.
And there's going to be an Alvin Gerson subplot. And that is what happened.
That is what happened.
Right. Never forget Alvin Knighters. Then my Alvin theory was correct. Yours wasn't.
Looking through like text responses, people did say that he was boring. He's barely a character. Completely correct. People also pointed out that he's a side character and all that other stuff. You know, he'll get a side story, which is what we did get, and his lack of character icon and that, and also no mention of the Garner Maker.
Yeah, he just doesn't have a strong enough connection to the main cast in order for it to really work narratively.
Yeah,
right.
That I remember in regards to the Garner Maker or the character icon. People said some stupid shit about that. Like, we're gonna get his character icon revealed when he takes off his armor, which is so dumb. Why didn't he have it when we talked to him? Why wasn't he not mentioned in the Garner Maker? Oh, because Gaster doesn't like him. Oh, he's forgotten by Gaster, so he's mad at Gaster. Okay, what about Des? She's the one character who's like have this. Oh, she's the character who's forgotten written all over her, and you're putting it on Alvin? Come on.
Yeah, I do remember people like bringing up like a plot twist near the end of Persona 4 in similar regards to Alvin Knight and be like, oh, it can work like this, ignoring the fact that is like that the plot twist in question with Persona 4 is like the most laughable twist ever and is like a fucking meme in the fandom.
Oh,
and people make fun of it for how stupid it is. Yeah,
it's always funny when you bring that up. I like that twist. It's bad.
Yeah,
it sounds like shit.
Spoiler alert for Persona 4. I don't know, jump ahead like 10 seconds, I guess. The plot twist in question is that a random gas station attendant you interact with like a single time at the start of the game is secretly God and is the true final boss. And you have to do like a bunch of insane bullshit in order to even unlock this event to happen.
That sounds great. Well, to top this all off, I found someone wrote a little mini essay on how Alvin Knight sucks. For the text responses, I'll read a small part of it. I hate this one the most. It's just emblematic of how theory crafting goes completely up its own ass and fails to think about what story it's trying to be told at all. Because, you know, it forgets about the Dreamer family and the
Holiday family.
It's about the boom.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it's pretty like obvious within the narrative, especially now, that like the story is about the family conflict between the Holidays and the Dreamers, right?
Yeah.
And then Alvin Knight steps in as a theory and it's just like, but what if actually it was all about the Boom family for some reason? What if it was just about like Gerson and Alvin's relationship and that was the main plot and all that death stuff, that was all just a side plot, you know, that's a side quest. It's so odd because it is like a theory that like intuits a side story, like a subplot within the narrative, and then thinks that it's going to be the main plot, which is interesting to look at it. I don't know. I think Alvin Knight is like an interesting theory in regards to how it ended up being discussed in terms of like the fandom and stuff. It's very funny to look back on. It's interesting to think about. And I don't necessarily blame Alvin Knighters for considering the idea necessarily.
Well, it's still shit, even with
because there was points. It's not like he had no evidence that you could argue.
But the points that they got were actually points for a different theory we'll get to.
Surprised in retrospect. I don't think I ever saw anybody like propose the idea of Gerson was Des's old teacher and that's why Des made the chapter 1 fountain. Because like we know that now, but like I can't remember a single Des Knighter arguing that point. Although maybe I didn't talk to Des Knighters enough. Maybe that one's on me.
Maybe. Miss Boom Knight. Chestnut kind of wanted me to mention this one right after Alvin Knight because this is kind of related to, I don't know.
Yes, this was a theory that asked the question, what if we did Alvin Knight, but even worse, for no reason?
Yeah, you know, Alvin Knighters, it's not the worst Knight theory, but you know, they're both 1 out of 10s. Still shit, but this one is amazingly shit. It takes a character who we haven't even seen off screen, is a side character, one line from Birdly, and that's all she has. One text response says, she's 1 line from Birdly. She does not exist yet. She barely even exists. Well, she does exist now, for sure. Yeah. There was like 1 video about it, and then also the Cami Boy G video.
Yes. It's just really funny to think about the Kamiboji video because it's just really like, yeah, what if we were doing Alvin Knight, but also not?
Yeah.
It's so odd, right? Because it's just
Yeah.
like, what if Miss Boom made the chapter 2 fountain? It's just like,
Yeah, the Kamiboji video is probably one of the reasons someone might have given this a more positive rating, probably.
For
this
sure.
has 8, 10 out of 10s for some reason. Oberon Smog. I like this one. That's a weird one. This is like a big Jaru theory. People even brought that up in the text responses, both with admiration and a negative light. Kind of a divisive theory. We did eventually get a Gerson Darkner that Alvin set up. That was like supposed to be set up for Oberon Smog. That's what Jaru thought. Jaru was more correct. It was half right. More right than Alvin Knight, which was just completely wrong.
It's in Shiruba kind of sped through that. Let me actually explain what the theory is for people who might not have heard of this somehow. Oberon Smog is a theory that the knight was a Dustner made from Gerson's hammer. He's the Dustner of Gerson, and he's the knight. The logic is that somehow somebody made him, like, in a dark fountain or something, and because he's a Dustner, he's able to then traverse into the light world and have determination and make fountains of his own.
What I remember Jaru said was that, like, because of the hammer was, like, buried underground, it, like, fell into the bunker shelter or whatever or something because it was underground. I don't know.
That's odd.
Yeah, that's one thing I remember he said, which is silly.
It's just an odd theory. It's very random. But at the same time, I guess it's not too dissimilar to what we did with Death Knight anyway, right?
Yeah.
Death Knight did come back as a weird Darkner zombie thing.
Yeah, that is kind of weird.
You
I
know?
just thought about that now. So, you know, it wasn't too off.
You could be kind of gracious with this one and be like, well, we did get a Dustner of Gerson, so that part of the theory is right. They just weren't the Knight. The Knight was actually Death, and also she is a weird zombie Darkner thing.
Yeah.
So that part, that the Knight is like a weird zombie Darkner thing, was also kind of right. So, it was half right in both directions somehow. What's more correct than Alvin Knight?
It was more correct than Alvin Knight. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I hope Jaru is happy and still believes in what the game is trying to say. No, that's stupid. that was necessary.
You're still wrong though. But my Gerson theory is more right than this. I'm calling it now.
Well, I don't know.
Some of the details were a little off. Mine was still more right.
I didn't put it on here as well. Technically, it is on here. You know, there was one part where people were asked what Lightners do you think will appear in the Dark World, and Gerson was included there. So technically, a Gerson Darkner Dustner was kind of a theory on the survey, but it just wasn't when you rated. But basically, I rated this one a 6. The Knight part was kind of ridiculous, but I did absolutely believe in the Gerson Darkner part, and we did get that.
Same. So I was always in favor of getting a Gerson Darkner at some kind. I thought it would be more of like a OC of his Lord of the Hammer character. Instead, we got a Dustner who simply dons his Lord of the Hammer persona for his boss fight. Still very close, I would say. And it's not like I didn't think a Gerson Dustner wouldn't happen. I did think we would do it. I just thought it would happen in like chapter 7 to like wrap up the Boom, subplot. Right? I thought the idea was like Noelle is like the angel. She like creates the angel's heaven. And in that sense, it's meant to be like the rapture. And she like revives all the dead monsters as like Dustners. And this would be like part of the plot and stuff. And that's how we would get a Gerson Dustner in chapter 7. That's what I was thinking. Instead, we ended up getting it in chapter 4, right? I'm not like disappointed in it or anything like that.
When I get through like writing the summary, it was kind of hard because it's also kind of connected to Asriel's pile of dust. So I kind of had to write around that without explaining that part. It was like built around these weird Jaru theories that he had already made when
he came up with the Knight
theory. My first reaction to the theory was like just very wowed. It was really out there. I was enjoying the video, I guess, but it was just so unlikely. So many other weird out there theories it was building upon, so it would be kind of surprising if this ended up being true.
I think the thing for me about it when I watched Oberon Smog for the first time back when it came out, I had already came up with my Gerson Darkner chapter 4 Lord of the Hammer theory.
Really?
I came up with that like within the first month of chapter 2 coming out. In fact, most of my big theories, I would say, for my chapter 2 days, I figured out within the first month. Like my Chris Knight, Rouse working with them, Noelle, Angel, and all that stuff. So when I saw this, I was just like, well, I agree that like a Gerson Darkner is like super on the table, likely happened, but them being the Knight, that's just outrageous. That doesn't make any sense. Feels like it comes out of nowhere, and then also like doesn't feel coherent with any stuff. And then also there's no way to connect it to Chris making the fountain, so that means you have to believe in like TV Friends or some bullshit like that. And that was also a huge no-go for me. It's like you have to answer why Chris made a premeditated fountain, otherwise your Knight theory is like immediately discarded, in my opinion, right? Which is why I was always so hell-bent on being like, okay, it's either Chris Knight or it's Chris multi-Knight, and Chris is working with the Knight.
Okay.
Because those were the only two theories that could explain Chris making a fountain in a narratively satisfying way.
Others did seem pretty similar to that. Like, I don't think he's the Knight, but a Gerson Darkner could happen. People, there's some other funny text responses. His hammer is still buried after the Knight made 2 fountains? Question mark. Unclear. It might have never been buried, or Alvin buried it up. That was weird.
Yeah.
We've already talked about that. If you know the name Oberon Smog, you need to turn your computer off and reinvent your life. Yeah, one final thing I want to say though. Early on,
In the chapter 3 and 4 era,
I did kind of see a double standard where people treated this one as like being absolutely correct, but like even though it was more like half right, and then other like half right theories, like I don't know, Chris Knight was like treated as absolutely debunked, incorrect in every way, you know.
Yeah,
I remember
people
seeing
people did absolutely like have a double standard regarding this theory, where they would be like, Jaru was completely right about Oberon Smog, and then also say
I was right about Susie making a fountain.
Yeah, now granted, when it comes to the whole doubles, people having double standard thing, that there is a bit of a Goomba fallacy to this, where it's like the guy giving people partial credit and like Jaru partial credit is not necessarily the same guy being like, if you didn't have 100% perfect accuracy on all your theories, you're wrong and stupid. And also like the guy who's saying, if you didn't have 100% perfect accuracy, probably never made or posted a single fucking Deltarune theory in his entire life. So it's like, bro, you weren't even fucking playing. You're going to a fucking poker table. You haven't even played. You haven't bet anything. And you're like trying to talk shit about a guy who like fucking lost his hand in poker. Like, come on.
I know some people
had a bad
like
hand.
That. Yeah.
You know, come on. How you talking shit? You're not even like participating.
Papyrus Knight. We also sadly have to talk about this one. You know, others don't seem to like it, you know, judging by the ratings. You know, haters can be found, but this one did have its fans back then. For some reason, we can't find them here. I don't think this theory is low enough, but here it is.
Yeah, you might not be able to tell it just by the graph, but Papyrus Knight was actually one of the more popular Knight theories. It was like top 6. It was the lowest of the popular ones.
Yes.
Is how I would put it. The fact that it was a popular one at all is like kind of baffling.
Yeah, it's insane. I do think it's worse than Alvin Knight though.
Oh, absolutely. It's much, much worse than Alvin Knight.
Because at least he shows up in the game already.
At least Alvin is like a character that's new to Deltarune. At least Alvin had some evidence. He had some stuff going on within the narrative that could like put him near the scene of the crime and stuff.
Yeah, and Papyrus is a comic relief. He's just a comic relief. That was pointed out by like everyone. Text responses too, you know. Another poorly conceived theory. Papyrus is a comic relief character, and the Knight would be undercut by this. Papyrus isn't the main focus of the plot, you know. It's kind of insane to put a character that had just that kind of role in Undertale and into this. It's insane. And I don't know. This is probably my least favorite Knight theory. And I don't know why.
Yeah, it's pretty trash. I have a few things I do want to say about it, though, of course. The thing, like, it's really bad because, like, Papyrus has not even appeared at all yet in Deltarune, right?
Nope.
So you have that. He has no connection to any of the characters in the cast on the count that he's just moved into town, which is also his only, like, slightly, like, point in favor of him is the fact that the Knight started doing stuff the same time Papyrus and Sans moved into town, which is, like, a weird coincidence, but probably not that much of a coincidence. That will probably be plot relevant, but also that doesn't mean that Papyrus is the Knight, right?
Yeah, on like the Steam page for Deltarune, you know, it mentioned that Undertale characters would be returning, and for Papyrus it said like, huh? Papyrus? No, he's busy. sorry. And I guess that was like used as evidence that he was like being built up as important. And we did
Yeah.
also have like the weird interaction with Sansa's house. But you know, it's building up to something, but not the night. That was also said in text responses. Papyrus being so absent is suspicious, but I doubt he's the Knight, you know?
Because, like, that's really it. It's like he's connected to Gaster, and
Yeah.
he's, like, shows up in the town when the plot starts, essentially. And, like, that's kind of it.
And,
you know?
in Undertale, he wanted to be a royal guard. And here in Deltarune, he is one.
The Roaring Knight. Because he wanted to be a royal guard, and now he's the Roaring Knight. Yeah,
there
of
were
course.
there were like two pathways for this theory, you know. He either wanted to have friends, and that's why he was making the fountains, and there was some stupid shit like, oh, he was being tricked by Gaster or something. I don't know.
Or
and then there was
just he's evil now, and he's a completely different character.
Yeah, I know
might
that.
as well just be a new character.
It's so ridiculous. I've seen that. Like, it doesn't feel like Papyrus anymore. It's just it's just someone else at that point. You know, it's like people say character assassination. Bro literally can't kill a fly. It just doesn't work. And then there's like how it connects to Undertale, because you know people think that Sans is from Deltarune, and then there's like similar theories with Papyrus, even though it's a little weird there, but we'll get to that eventually. But here there was like, okay, if Papyrus is evil, then why is he the way that he is in Undertale then? Well, if you ever heard of PTSD, then you could put that together with Papyrus having it in your head, and that's exactly what happened. He was like, oh, I gotta hide this. Basically. That's a thing, apparently. I'm not joking.
Yes.
He's just hiding it in his subconscious.
He's just pretending to not be evil and understand.
Yeah.
It's very silly.
It's very silly. It doesn't work either way. I've read into it and I don't like it. It was just stupid. Oh, remember
It was so popular though. It's crazy.
Yeah. There was like a joke in Undertale where Papyrus was like, there are no skeletons in my closet. Except me sometimes. And yeah, that was like foreshadowing to Closet Knight.
People would use that in combination with Closet Knight to try to argue for Papyrus Knight, even though like skeletons in the closet is such a common phrase. Yeah. That was the joke, but
yeah, two great theories. I love that combination. It would have ruined the game. I know people like make jokes about it, like, oh, I bet Papyrus is the Knight. Like, people do that all the time now. I get like back when the chapters just dropped, I guess there were some people who were like, oh, Papyrus could be the Knight, but like now I don't think people even do that. I think it's mostly just a joke at this point. I've
definitely seen people like who are out of the theory loop make jokes about Papyrus Knight as like a ridiculous Knight theory concept to make fun of theorists. And then like their chat or whatever, because those usually be like a live stream. Like I remember Joel did this, like Vine Sauce Joel did this. And then the Twitch chat was like, no, that's a real theory. There's people that actually believe that.
I guess people believe more in Rudy Knight now. Bad theory. Doesn't make me as angry as Alvin Knight, because that was the biggest thing ever, and it was just so obviously shit.
But Alvin Knight is not nearly as bad as Papyrus Knight.
Yeah, it's not.
Papyrus Knight is much worse. Like Papyrus Knight should be in the camp of obviously terrible Knight theories, along with like every other Undertale character Knight. But for some reason it just wasn't. For some reason it was taken like somewhat seriously and had like an actual active like fan base essentially.
Yeah.
Of course, looking by the graph, we can see that everybody outside of the Papyrus Knighters, for the most part, did not take Papyrus Knight very seriously.
Yeah, they didn't really take it seriously. Vessel Knight.
This was another wrong one, but also was one of the popular ones. This was like one of the big ones.
Yeah, this had a big following on Twitter. And,
specifically thanks to Oblivion Theory.
Yeah, that was a big doc and such. Just reading off the summary I wrote or whatever, you know, I said that Chris is a subversion of a silent protagonist, and they want to be separate from you. And if the vessel was Knight, it would build further on like this dynamic. And we have yet another character like this. You know, it's someone you made, but they have their own goals. The character we create is the character making the game for us. You know, it's the first thing we open the game with. So it needs to be important in some way, maybe. They go
Yeah.
around making fountains to keep us entertained. That was like one of the things in Oblivion Theory, I think. Interesting stuff like that. Like, this
Yeah.
is definitely the best Knight theory that was like 100% wrong.
Yeah, I would agree. This was definitely like, I would also say that this was probably the best Knight theory that was 100% wrong.
This was my
Because even
third pick.
Alvin is like maybe a part of the conspiracy, maybe, depending on how the conspiracy is actually like structured, which is not
Yeah.
clear yet.
Or if it's a fucking cult or some shit.
Yeah, like he might have like put the hammer in the church under like Carol's orders and shit, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
we don't know. It's not
I
clear.
don't know. Looking at the ratings, it did pretty well though, you know. One of the best ones, along with like Alvin and Chris. Like, it has a weird jump in like big spike in like 5s, even though this is like separate from Oblivion Theory, which also had a big spike in the 5s. This one didn't necessarily have like a big dock, but I guess this is just inherently a 5 out of 10 theory. I guess it just has that
it
energy.
is just kind of, it does kind of give 5 out of 10 energy overall.
I did give it a 5.
Yeah, because for me there was a lot of like points regarding Vessel Knight that always tripped up on me. For one thing, it doesn't make sense how the vessel would be able to make the chapter 1 fountain if you assume that the Goner Maker sequence was done like in real time.
I don't think it was.
Unless I guess the vessel could teleport, which I guess the Knight can teleport. So
yeah, they can. They can. So I guess they have that.
Yeah. For me personally, in order for Vessel Knight to make sense, the idea would have to be that Chris and the vessel swapped roles, right? And that Chris was supposed to be the Knight, and then the vessel was supposed to be the player character, and then they swapped. But that doesn't make sense under the logic that Chris is already making fountains and doing Knight stuff, right?
Oh yeah. Or everything got like definitely a somewhat of a spike in like 1s, but here it kind of gradually goes down. It still has a plenty of 1s though, but still. People did think this one was cool in the text responses, you know, stuff like good alternative to Chris Knight if it's not true. Kinda wasn't. It's complicated. We've talked about it. Similar to Alvin Knight, some people also said that this was barely a character.
Yeah, Vessel is also barely a character, but at the very least, you do have to interact with the vessel at the start of the game. When the vessel shows back up later, you would at least know what the fuck they are.
Yeah, it is
as opposed to Alvin, who you straight up won't remember meeting.
Yeah, the vessel is the thing we open the game with. It's what sets the tone for the entire game. So I feel like this would have been fine, you know? And it's not like Death didn't exactly have like, I mean, Death did have setup in chapter 2, and 3, but we're talking about before the new chapters came out. And I did still like that theory, even if it wasn't too much, but it was mandatory, you know? Some other text responses. How can something be the Knight and be discarded at the same time? The vessel isn't even said. Some people also said that the vessel wasn't stored in the game data in like text responses.
I don't know about that.
I think that was the case. I think like it even
people oftentimes say things about the code, but they heard from like someone else. But like, I don't know how true a lot of that stuff is. I don't bother to look myself, and I don't care.
If you do start from chapter 2, I think it actually does like, it already has some set values it'll just pick out for you if you start from chapter 2. So I don't know. One text response said like, makes no sense because of scrapped Deltarune intro. How exactly does it debunk Vessel Knight of all things?
Oh, because the vessel is like customizable. Therefore, the intro would make sense with a customizable character. I guess is the logic.
Oh, I guess. It's
but
weird.
Like, they could just be like vaguely silhouetted or like wearing a cloak or something. You know, just put a helmet on them, that would be fine.
Or, you know, with Chris not being the main Knight, you know, that would have been like the red herring. Mostly
similar silhouettes. Yeah.
Unless you pick the bald one. Then they kind of have the same silhouette. Then it kind of works as a red herring in that way, you know?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because that shit's not real. It's not even a real thing.
Well, we're talking about it.
Yeah.
It's real
I don't, people, it's just it's a matter of like people put a lot of stock in the scrapped anime intro.
Yeah.
That shit never mattered.
It was scrapped. It doesn't matter because it was scrapped. It's not in the game. It's not a part of the story. Use what's in the game, you know? So we might have fucking changed everything about the game. You don't know. Might have never had Susie. Might have never had Ralsei. Who knows? It might have never had, I don't know. People did say stuff like, it would require a lot of explaining, but okay, sure. It's a very interesting idea, but I think we need to learn more though. it definitely is like weird because it gets like scrapped, I guess. Looks like people do kind of find the idea interesting. It was my number 3 pick. My 2 and 3 picks were both like characters that were like discarded in some way, and everyone else, like Alvin, he's still running around, but no, I didn't want that. Yeah, Vessel definitely is something important in some way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't.
I mean, another big point for Vessel Knight, I would say, is the fact that the vessel is connected to Gaster. So that's definitely a big point in favor, because again, in order for the Knight to make sense, they have to be connected to Gaster and gain their knowledge about Dark Worlds from Gaster and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. We did talk about this earlier, but Chris is a vessel. That was like a theory, but you can look at the Chris video for that. Who cares about this one? Gaster Knight. You know,
it's like, what if... Yeah, Gaster Knight. It's like, what if the Vessel Knight didn't make sense? it honestly kind of just feels like a worse Vessel Knight. But then again, Vessel Knight is also just kind of Gaster Knight, but like...
I guess, in a way.
Different.
Yeah, the voice and the Knight are very mysterious. So what if they're the same person? That would tie Deltarune together, and we'd finally get to know Gaster, instead of him just being in the background. And also, we know that Gaster is the man that speaks in hands, and Knight is also associated with hands. A bunch of different connections between like the Dark Worlds and Gaster. You have Darker Yet Darker, and the same texture used in the opening being used in the fountain. Gaster's the Eggman, and if you write egg in Windings, then you get the chess move for the Knight.
Yes.
Coincidence? I think not. Gaster Knight wasn't exactly big. I don't know. It did fine enough rating-wise because I guess it's Gaster.
This could still work if Des is being controlled by Gaster, like how Chris is being controlled by the player.
I guess. Oh, Gaster's the player too!
Yeah.
He's the Luigi! He's the Luigi! That's what's up with old Toby Fox tweets. He's the player too!
It's not that bad of a theory.
It did better than all of those other bullshit theories. He is definitely an important character.
I mean, he did write the plot.
Yeah, he did write this prophecy. Wait, so he is kind of the Knight.
He's not the Knight himself. He's the guy who wrote the Knight to do those things. Yeah.
So I guess this one wasn't 100% wrong.
In a way. But that's kind of cheating in a sense, right? Gaster's like kind of omnipresent. He's everywhere. He's doing everything. He's like God, but if free will wasn't real. Assuming that's how Gaster works.
Just like one of the text responses said, in the wise words of Andrew Cunningham, with so little data points, you can make a case for whatever the flying fuck you want. So you can just do, Gaster, I guess. Instead of just a new character, This is a completely new character. He's like new character, but not bullshit, Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In text responses, people did say that Gaster was definitely important, but definitely not the Knight. He probably had some other role. Was definitely connected to the Knight stuff going on. And then there was also the strange man point. What Sham said, the Knight and strange man were separate. Nah, we've talked about that also.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the Knight and the strange man stuff. Like there seems to be like a separation between the two. For a lot of people, that kind of killed Gaster Knight for them.
Yeah.
At one point.
It wasn't great. I think I gave this a 3.
I don't know. Des is just more of a real character than Gaster is, I feel like. With the whole idea of Gaster, he's more real than the other characters. He's like a real dude, like you mean. He's trying to do the Flowey shit again.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. But the fact that he doesn't have any real presence, like how Flowey did. Like, Flowey's Asriel. Like, he's kind of the most important character in the game. Gaster, he's the most important character in the game. All he does is talk to me once in a while in like some menus or like after I beat the chapter. I don't give a shit about Gaster. I'm just gonna be honest. I don't care.
Where we saw him last was in the depths, and he's like shattered across time and space. So that too, shattered across time and space, compared to Des, they're both kind of in a similar situation. She was like lost years ago, and it's kind of all we know, something about the bunker. So it was kind of easy to imagine, oh, Des is coming back and she's the Knight, It's easier to do that. If there was no Chris red herring and the chapter 2 ending was different or something, then I don't think this would have been the worst thing ever. But whatever, now we're just imagining shit. What we'll get is probably better than any of that. There's also like some people who want him to not be like in the main plot. People want him to be like a secret you go and look for, Text response is like, I don't think he can really interact the main story, you know? He's more of a background man with slow burn build-up.
Yeah, it would be a bit odd for him to be the knight. I don't know, I guess, I think in theory it could work fine.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It wouldn't be the
Yeah.
worst thing ever. It was clear that's not exactly what we're doing.
Yeah,
The
because we're
chapter
doing,
endings
we're doing
from the-
Gaster Angel.
oh yeah, that was the theory.
I mean,
Later,
Gaster
too.
Angel's just real. He's just like,
Yeah.
it says the angel made the prophecy, and then Gaster
Mhm.
says he made the prophecy. It's kind of
Yeah.
just like, y'all need to hop on Trinity Angel now because it's just canon. It's just
Yeah,
true.
do that.
I need to make
Watch
another
Chestnut.
video on that.
You should. Knife Knight. Didn't you like this one? Knife Knight?
Knife Knight is like, alright. So,
Yeah, this one didn't do well at all. It kind of people hated this one.
Knife Knight is shockingly close to canon, is what I
Yeah.
say about it. If the Knight was just a Dustner of Chris's knife, if Knight we got was like a Dustner made from Chris's knife, then Knife Knight would be canon. That's not what we ended up doing, but it's so close to what we ended up doing. 'Cause
Yeah.
the idea with Knife Knight is that the knight that the Darkners perceive is actually like Chris's knife that will turn into like a Knight Darkner at some
Of
point
Death.
and like be like a red herring antagonist, not necessarily of Death, right? That wasn't.
I would prefer it to
necessarily-
be of Death. I'd prefer it to be
It
of
would
Death
be better
is
if
a
it
red
was like a
herring.
Dustner of Death, yes. But
Yeah.
the theory was just like it would be a Knight Darkner that we'd have like a boss fight.
Oh, yeah.
with to trick Susie, right? That would be the main component of it. It would allow Chris to continue being the knight and making fountains while Susie is like chasing after this Darkner knight that she thinks is the knight, but it's actually Chris who's
Yeah.
making the fountains. Like Knife Knight is just like a Chris Knight variant. It's like how I
Yeah.
said in my one Chris Knight video. It's like I said
Yeah.
there was 20 different versions of Chris
Yeah.
Knight. Every single one of them was better than Alvin Knight, which is
Yeah,
true.
okay.
And also the version of Deltarune we got was one of those 20 versions. That was one of the 20 Chris Knight theories I had was exactly what we got. I just
Yeah.
want people to
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah. This was just Chris's knife back in the chapter 2 days, and now
Yes.
it's more like it's a Dustner of Death now, basically.
That would be the new variant. But the problem
Yeah.
with like new Knife Knight is
Yeah.
that the knight walks into the second Dark World in chapter 4 and closes the door behind it, and then Chris still has their knife and gives it to Susie to make a Dark World.
Oh,
It
right.
can't possibly be Chris's knife is the Darkner. It could still possibly be that the knight is a Darkner made from Dessa's knife, and she has a separate, different knife from Chris's, and that Darkner like took Dessa's soul, and that gave them determination and the ability to exist in the light world. That's very, very possible. If that ends up being what we're doing, I wouldn't be surprised at all, because the knight literally just turns into a knife for multiple of their attacks.
Yeah, that's a point towards this
So
one.
the knight actually being a knife darkener that has taken Dessa's soul is like extremely likely, I would say.
Yeah.
It's an extremely likely outcome. So in spirit, Knife Knight is still kind of true, even if it wasn't Chris's knife.
Yeah, people had a pretty fair reaction to this one, you know, it was kind of weird, but it wasn't the worst.
Honestly,
I
the
think.
theory was really not that bad. People just have like a negative reaction to it. I think it's a mix of Chris Knight plus them
Yeah.
not being familiar with the theory at all, because it was really only argued by like maybe 2 guys ever. Because the theory is not that complicated. It's just Chris Knight, but more specific. Like this is just a variation of Chris Knight.
People had different reactions to it. Like, it would be strange but fun. How the fuck is the knife doing all that? I can confirm I was the knife. The knife is magic and makes Chris evil theory. Oh, knife third entity. Knife third entity. Knife from inanimate insanity. If you lock the fuck in. I don't know if you know what that is. I don't know. It doesn't matter. You know, it's Chris Knight with extra steps, you know. Someone made a new video or something. I think it was like a Neo Chris Knight theory or something. It was made by someone who didn't even believe in. I don't know. It was just something I read.
I don't
in my
think
notes. It's
any
not-
Neo Chris Knight theory has been made by an actual Chris Knighter. I haven't seen a single one.
Yeah.
I've seen like 4 or 5, but they're all garbage. And they're
Yeah.
insults to Chris Knighters everywhere.
Yeah, shit like time traveling Chris Knight is bullshit. What I want it to be like Lightyear. That's like
Yeah.
you're bordering on the Alvin Knight bullshit. That's the opposite.
It's
of what I
garbage
want.
and it's insulting. And the fact
Yeah.
that that video has like more views than all of my Chris Knight videos combined is like so fucking
does?
insulting.
Was it
Yeah.
10K? No, 100K.
It was at
or
like
something?
9K at least.
Oh,
if I remember.
I'm glad just a guy like that is able to paint a very specific image of
What Chris Knighters now believe.
what isn't even true.
Yeah.
Great. Catti Knight, I'm only putting this here because Chestnut wanted me to talk about it separately outside
Okay.
of the bullshit candidates.
Let me tell you the tragedy of Catti Knight. This Knight theory is objectively just as good as Alvin Knight, but nobody believed it. But Alvin Knight was super popular. Okay, so Catti Knight has everything going for it that Alvin doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Catti has mandatory screen time and like almost guaranteed interaction. Catti has a character portrait. Catti is a new character to Deltarune in the same way that Alvin is, being a new family member of a family we had already seen in Undertale, right?
You should say it was
Catti-
mandatory, right?
I mean, you can technically just not talk to Catti in chapter
Yeah.
1, but like nobody does, right? Like
Yeah.
you're going to talk to her in chapter 1, right?
Yeah.
She is directly connected to the main cast, including Chris, Noelle, and Susie. She has like direct ties with them, right?
Yeah.
She is connected to the chapter 1 Dark World location, the school that she goes to. Logically, she could have also absolutely just made the library fountain. There's nothing stopping her, really.
The occult
I
stuff
guess.
or something?
Yeah, she could have made it before Noelle and Birdley got to the library. Or you could just believe in Closet Knight. You know, if a large person is fit inside, Catti could easily fit in that closet, right?
She's a big
If
cat.
you all hell bent on believing Closet Knight anyway, you might as well just believe it. So yeah, nothing stopping Catti from being the knight. Why did nobody believe this? Huh? Why did nobody believe this? Why did everybody believe in Alvin Knight, but nobody believed in Catti Knight, even though they were equally as likely to be the knight?
I guess it was because
People wanted the knight to be related to
the religion in the hometown, you know? So
I
and like
suppose.
the angel that was also in
Yeah.
the prophecy, you know, and it turned out, oh hey, it's the same thing.
Catti Knight even survives the Ram dialogue because Catti could
Yeah.
theoretically be the girl that Chris played with as a child, right? Catti survives into chapter 3 up until the night reveal, which is crazy to think about because that Ram dialogue insta-killed every Knight theory besides Chris and Chris Dust Multi-Knight, but also Chris Catti Knight also survives with that Ram
Also
dialogue, which is
Noelle, I
hilarious.
guess.
Yeah, well, no,
Noelle.
because Noelle can't be the Knight because of chapter 2.
Unless she's
and, like, Snowface and
pretending.
stuff, which is stupid. But yeah, Noelle can't be the Knight because of chapter 2 and stuff.
But Catti Knight is also stupid.
No, it's wrong. It is stupid. It's wrong and stupid. But also, like, it's just as reasonable as Alvin Knight. And it lived
Yeah.
longer than Alvin Knight. It actually made it an hour into chapter 3, which Alvin Knight did not. It's funny how I never see anyone react to that Ram dialogue, despite that being, like, this massive lore fucking nuke, right?
Yeah,
That,
it
like,
is.
literally insta-kills, like, basically all the Knight theories, right? Where Ram's just like, oh yeah, remember how all the Dark Worlds are based off of these play games you would do with, like, that girl? And so at that point, it's just like, okay, well, either Chris is the Knight and the girl is Noelle, or it's Chris Dust Multi-Knight. And there was the only options after that dialogue, and nobody ever seems to acknowledge that.
Yeah. I guess some people here said the whole knight thing, you know, that argument that she would be one of the knights, you know?
Yeah, I guess
Multi-Knight.
Catti, 7 days, 7 nights, but replace burger pants with Catti. Frankly, more reasonable. That is actually a much more reasonable theory.
I guess. Now with the friend connections.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. New character knight. This is just kind of bullshit. This is bullshit.
Yeah, it's just kind of nonsense. It's just like, what if the knight's a new character that we've never seen before? And it's just like, yeah, the game could be dumb. Sure, why not? It's like, why?
This did decently well for some
reason.
Of individual characters. This is the knight theory that did the best, but also like it's such a nothing theory, you might as well not count it. So that's the one that did the best because it's no one. Who is new character? It's no one, you know? Oh, that reminds me. I remember Toby wrote something about like having to introduce every major character in chapter 1, having a bit of issue with that or something.
Yeah.
Or when like writing. You can't exactly just do new character. Also, it did well probably because new character could be literally anything, you know? Even the best thing ever. You might not know. You might not know. It could have been the best fucking thing ever. It's also the reason why it has a big spike in 5s because it's a nothing theory. It could literally be anything.
It wasn't new character knight usually the idea that the knight would literally just be called the Roaring Knight, right? And that they would be like a Knight Darkener in the same vein as like King and Queen along with chess theory. Right? The idea was literally just because being a new character that's a Lightner, even though like Queen says that the Knight is a Lightner.
Yeah.
Chapter 2. We now have 3 and 4 where the Knight is literally either a Darkener or a Titan. Just happens to have the abilities of a Lightner and has determination and can exist in the light world despite clearly being a Darkener of some kind.
This is just kind of a lazy cop-out answer in terms of like trying to think about like set up and payoff, you know? They didn't want to do that. They were just like, it's probably a new character. It's boring, you know?
I
Like
feel
some
like I
people...
only ever saw it in like Reddit comments where it's just like have you
Oh,
guys
yeah.
considered that the knight is just a new character? Why are you guys all trying to mystery box it? Why are you trying to make it a whodunit? And it's like, well, if you're trying to make it a whodunit, just say Chris is the knight. God damn it. Like
You
that's
kinda-
another big problem. It's like if you're trying to like not make the knight a whodunit mystery, just say Chris is the knight, right?
Yeah.
Like that's another big problem with new character knight is to reveal Chris Knight. Go back on that and then be like, actually, the knight is a new character. That's so bad. That's so fucking bad.
Yeah, that is actually very dumb. Some people said stuff like, would prefer build up. Feels like a cop-out answer. It's impossible to disprove or prove. How am I supposed to rate this? Give me at least something to work with, you know?
I think that's a big problem with like every single Knight theory, essentially, besides Chris Knight and Chris Multi-Knight, right? Is that you already revealed Chris Knight. Going back on that would be like terrible because you have to be exponentially better than Chris Knight in order to have it work. And I said, it's like I said back in the day, it's like the only things that can work are Chris Knight and Chris Multi-Knight, and then we got Chris Multi-Knight. There you go. I hold by that my take where it's like, yeah, Chris Knight was better than everything else, and that's why it was Chris Knight. That's why we still got Chris Knight, even though Dust was also the Knight.
That's unrelated to new character knight.
It's close enough. Everything's unrelated to new character knight because new character knight isn't anything.
Yeah, it's not anything. Text responses said, like, you can't hate a non-theory. It's basically canon because you cannot object it to it, really. It depends. What new character lacks in concrete lore, new character makes up in their lack of concrete lore. You know, it's, you know,
just
we
like
just
Carol
said
Knight.
that, you know, oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
I was gonna say that it was like, it's like Gaster, but worse, because at least Gaster's a character, and he's like big as shit, so you can kind of put him everywhere. And there were some people who were like, actually, with this one, and said that Des and Oberon Smog fell under this. How do you feel about that?
I disagree, because Oberon Smog is just Zombie Gerson, and Zombie Gerson is in fact just a character that we've already met in Undertale.
Yeah. And Deltarune now.
Yep.
And Des was being set up in chapter 1 and 2.
This
So,
is a named character.
yeah, she has relations to other characters, so she's not new.
An example of new character knight would be like Asgore's brother, you know, that we've never met before.
That sounds great.
Remember when Toby mentioned that in like the anniversary stream? I think it was.
Wait, what?
Yeah. You like mentioned it. It's just like the idea is like I had to like introduce all the characters. It would be weird if Asgore's brother, who's never been talked about before, randomly showed up. You literally referenced that like 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
That was the example he gave.
Great. Now it's time for really bad candidates rapid fire round. We're gonna go through all of them.
So each one of these knight candidates had like some kind of critical flaw, which made them unviable. They were either a character from Undertale originally that kind of killed them for most people off the bat. They were either B, functionally a non-character at all, like Everyman Knight, for example, or they were like a Darkener. That would also kill them instantly. Or they were a character that already had a very prominent role within the narrative that was not the knight, or could die in the narrative, like Noelle or Birdley or Susie, right? So every single one of these knight theories falls into one of those like 4 things.
And it would be pointless to format like we've done with the other ones, because it would be pointless to talk about some of these in full, you know?
Yeah.
And most of these got like a bunch of ones.
Yeah, these all got ones, but we should go down the list and show off the graphs and stuff.
We'll start with the one with the
least amount of 1 out of 10s before we make ourselves down.
Everyman. This one has higher ratings than
Oberon Smog.
At least Oberon Smog had a big video, and Gerson Darkman was its own theory, and that became true. I remember Spooky Doo proposing this in a video where he talked about a bunch of different knight theories, and he mentioned like this summoning of Everyman, this play. Like, watch me bring up some old scripture from 3,000 gazillion years ago when making a theory. Like, that's what Toby was inspired by.
I think the funny thing about Everyman nowadays is that conceptually, Friend has kind of replaced Everyman, but it's also Friend is like, what if Everyman was true? What if all the insane Everyman theories was actually true? And that's what Friend is.
Yeah, Everyman has just disappeared. Poor man. Asriel Knight. People sure took note of this being Undertale too. So this one would just be literally Undertale too, you know?
I mean, what happens if he actually does end up making the Chapter 5 Dark World, like how most people believe?
Yeah. I don't think that
Do Asgore Knighters get a point?
Yeah. Oh, technically this is the 4th most correct theory, because, you know, he's he's in on the conspiracy right after Carol.
Yeah.
Yeah, which means Alvin Knight is also Alvin's the fifth most correct Knight theory. Ralsei Knight, he's sus, but also he's a Darkner. Everyone mentioned that.
He can't make a fountain.
Noel Knight. Someone rates this one highlights probably because of Multi Knight. I remember an insane theory which was like Death's third entitying Noel to make
Cyberworld
Fountain. That was like this kind of shit. That's where Fountain Creator during the day kind of leads you.
Yeah. I'm surprised. I am a little surprised that 7 Days, 7 Nights didn't give this one a bit of a boost, because that was the best part of 7 Days, 7 Nights was the Chapter 7 theory part.
I see Knight. They had a somewhat of a spike in tense because, you know, people were treating it as an ironic joke. I remember seeing some people discussing it seriously for one period, but let's not worry about it.
Icy Knight was actually closer to the truth than like a lot of other Knight theories were.
What?
Icy is definitely more connected to the Knight than I think what most people thought it would be, because we got Death Knight and the whole Icy, which is connected to ERAM in some capacity.
I guess.
The whole burning out the eyes on the pizza box, which is something that Death did. The whole Icy is like a weird Darkner thing. And then also like Icy's potential connection to Friend. There's a lot of Icy stuff, okay? He's pretty relevant to the Knight plot.
Great. Susie Knight. It ruins her character. It ruins her character. That's what everyone said. That's pretty obvious.
Makes no sense. Yeah.
Yeah, she's just pretending. Great.
Susie Knight is like the almost Hans of all Hans twists. Let's be real here.
That would literally just be Frozen.
She'd be like Mega Hans. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be shit. Undyne Knight. She wears an armor, and then I guess people pointed towards her for that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, she wears armor, right? She's a knight, right? Like, we see her near the scene of the crime in chapter 2, right? She's right outside the library. Rules card is knight.
This one is pretty funny. People thought it was pretty funny. I love Jaru's segments in this video. Rules card and the Roaring Knight have the same initials of RK.
Yeah,
epic.
that's the evidence.
That's the evidence. Sans Knights, Papyrus Knight, like too.
Yeah, it's got the same pros as Papyrus Knight, I guess. That's it.
Alfie's Knight. I remember seeing a big Tumblr post for this one. I remember coming across it, but I don't know. I just looked at it the same way as Alvin Knight, just kind of bullshit.
Yeah, I remember seeing one guy being very like pro Alfie's Knight. According to the survey, though, there was actually 3 guys who are diehard Alfie's Knighters. Because 3 people give it 10. Yeah.
There was a funny text response I found. Is she even in the game? Yes! She's
literally mandatory interaction. You can't not interact with her.
That's how do you miss that? How do you forget that? Tutorial Knight. Undertale's parallel story. What if the girl goat is the evil goat this time? Instead of the guy goat. One of the other 7 human souls is the Knight. Whoa. And yes, I know, I wrote 7 human souls, and not 6, because, you know, Frisk and Kara, because they come later. Birdly Knight. I don't understand why this one's this low, because, you know, he was at the location, calls himself
a knight,
and was literally about to make a fountain. That's more sus than Toriel, Undyne, and Alphys, don't you think?
Yeah, but you can kill him.
Yeah, you can kill him. Yeah, that's true.
It was always insulting when people would compare, like, Chris Knight to Birdly Knight. And like, well, Birdly almost makes a fountain, so why don't you think... Clearly, he's the knight. Like, shut up, dude. Chris made a premeditated fountain. Totally different. Using the exact same item that the knight did.
And I believed in multi-knight anyways, so it's not like that mattered to me.
Yeah.
It probably did bad anyways, because, you know, it was placed right at the end, so people were just kind of going through them and giving them ones, you know?
Yes. It's also just a 1 out of 10 theory.
But Knife Knight did come after Birdly, though.
Maybe the placement had no effect, who knows? But also, this is Birdly Knight.
Birdly Knight has a 0% chance of being right. Knife Knight was like a really good theory to the point in which it was almost completely correct.
Kara Knight. People did not want Undertale stuff here again. This is just another example of that.
This theory is worse than Birdly Knight.
Yeah. And now for the worst Knight theory of them all. Frisk Knight. The 1 out of 10s have been gradually going up, you know, if you watch closely on those. But now we go from like 1,516 to 1,724. That's a bit of a jump. And this is also the theory with the 2nd lowest ratings on this entire survey. You know, that's how fucking shitty this one is. People said very similar things to Kara Knight to this one. And the really bad candidates rapid fire round is over. Different knights on different routes. Some people thought that Chris Knight didn't make sense in the weird route, so they were like, oh, let's just, maybe someone else is the knight in the weird route. Like, the story changes and the pathway changes, you know? This one did not do well at all, and you can't find some people who like it. Like, this one guy said, there you are. But like, if you think about this for like a second, then this makes no sense, because this retcons itself, basically. Some weird Homestuck key thing. I don't know.
I never understood this theory. I never saw anybody arguing for it. Also,
Well, clearly
I don't think it
someone
makes
liked
any
it.
sense.
I did write some things that were kind of interesting about like this retconning itself, depending on like what choices you take, but that's not necessarily connected to the knight. But there is like this thing in chapter 2, the gift you can give to one of the characters, you know, Noelle,
Right. Yeah.
Susie, Birdley, or Alcé, you know,
And the
depending on what
gift
you...
is different depending on who you give it to.
Yeah, it just changes. Like, that's weird.
That is
But,
weird. But like,
yeah.
you can chop that up to like Dark World magic.
Obviously, I don't think it's connected to the knight. But, you know, chapter 2 has already been setting up a bunch of shit without us realizing it. You know, the triple truces thing. The friend colors are literally right there, you know.
Yeah, they're everywhere in chapter 2.
Yeah, with the cats, you know. And the roots, the small houses and trees, you know. So maybe this could be set up for something, you know. But it's definitely not related to the knight. The knight will never be revealed. I forgot to write notes on this one, but that's okay because nobody liked this. People wanted the knight to be revealed.
Such a silly theory. It would be very crazy if this actually came true and we just never met the knight, and it was just a mystery all the way till the end.
Not never met the knight. It's just it will never be revealed who the knight is. I think
God,
I
in
wrote
theory
in the
that could
summary-
still happen. Oh no.
I guess, but I wrote in the summary was like, we don't know everything about Gaster yet, so maybe we won't know everything about the knight either, or something.
In what chapter do people think the knight will be revealed?
Yeah, in which chapter is the knight revealed? This is super interesting.
Yeah, because everybody thinks it's either going to be like 5 or 6, and then the third
7.
most popular one is 7, which is like crazy late.
That's too much.
All the people saying chapter 2 are obviously Chris Knighters, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to go on a limb and say that the very small sliver of people who voted for chapter 3 are also probably Chris Knighters.
Yeah.
Right? Who were just being like, oh, well, the hard confirmation of Chris Knight will happen in chapter 3, so that's when it will be a thing, you know? To me, this graph really highlights how much the ending of chapter 3 was like why it was such a big deal to so many people in the fandom, why it was such a big like bombshell, because nobody expected the knight to show up in chapter 3, because why the fuck would they? This was Chris's fountain. So if you didn't believe Chris was the knight, why the fuck would you think the knight would just show up at the end of chapter 3, right?
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense. It was completely insane to think that. It only makes sense under the context that it's multi-knight, there's 2 knights, and Chris is only one of them.
Some people said 4, chapter 4, I guess. It's slightly worse than chapter 2.
I think the chapter 4 ones were probably Alvin Knighters who were like, okay, chapter 4 is in the church, and that's when we get the Alvin Knight reveal.
Yeah.
Which, like, okay, sure. A funny point is, like, I definitely feel like I've met a ton of people back in the chapter 2 days who were like, I'm an Alvin Knighter. I really believe Alvin's the knight. Also, I think chapter 5 is going to be in Flower King, and that's when we're going to meet the knight, and it's going to be revealed to be Alvin.
That's weird.
Like,
it makes more
people
sense.
who really believed that, where it's like, yep, Alvin's the knight, chapter 5's Flower King, and that's where we meet Alvin. And it's like, why? Why would Alvin Knight be revealed in Flower King? Like,
it makes more sense in church.
Anything to do with each other?
Nothing.
Arguably, that makes just as much sense as what actually happened, which is Death Knight is revealed in chapter 3 in Chris's fountain that they make in Chris's house. But yeah, I would say this graph is like one of the most important pieces of information in regards to like getting a grasp of what people believed regarding the knight stuff back in the chapter 2 days. This is like super accurate, really highlights what people's mindsets regarding the knight were.
It is about when the knight's identity is revealed, but you know,
I don't know. I feel like it's like a mix of both the knight identity and also the knight just appearing as they are.
That's fair.
Because I think a lot of people thought that Alvin Knight would be like wearing his armor, and it's like it's obvious to us that Alvin's the knight, but not to the characters for some reason. Which, like, to be fair, that did happen with Death Knight, where it's really obvious to anyone actually paying attention that it's Death. But to the characters, like Susie can't figure that out. You know, Susie is kind of dumb. It is stupid how Susie just never points out the antlers to the knight. Like,
haven't you talked about about that. How much of the plot hinges on the fact that Susie is a little bit stupid.
Yeah, and doesn't question things enough.
Yeah. I hate when people don't tell the whole truth. Maybe you should, I don't know, read.
I hate when people don't know the whole truth. It's so funny. Well, looking at Chris and Rouse, it's so fucking funny. Do you remember that one time with the Mario Galaxy meme with the emojis next to the text? People put that with like that scene where it's like, I hate when people who don't tell me the whole truth, and it was a little emoji for Chris and Rouse were right next to that text.
I remember seeing one where it's like Carol. She says she doesn't like gay people, and then it's like everyone and
everybody. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
You can't be homophobic in Deltarune, you know? The knight is manipulating the darkness specifically by entering the dark
Worlds.
but is moving objects in the light
Worlds.
I was trying to be as specific as possible with the naming. Sometimes that might not be the best for the theory. It did get like a bunch of 5s, I guess because of that, but it did do pretty well though. And this did end up being true.
Yeah, this was 100% true. Even in chapter 4, which is the only dark world where the knight actually does enter it and stuff, she doesn't really interact or influence. I mean, 3, we're not counting 3 because she only shows up at the end. You know, chapter 4, she enters the dark world that she made, right, specifically. That's the only dark world that the knight makes and then enters. Chapter 1 and 2 are both confirmed that the knight never entered the dark worlds. And even in chapter 4, she doesn't interact with any of the Darkners. None of the Darkners are by default aligned with the knight. In fact, they're aligned against the knight, but mistake Chris as the knight and attack Chris, and that's why there's random encounters. One of the NPCs literally explains it, where it's like, people are mistaking you as the knight because you're a knight, and we all know that you make dark fountains. And shit.
Okay.
Right?
Interesting. So, doesn't that kind of push multi-knight further?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess some people saw it as like, oh, it's making fun of Chris Knighters or something.
Yeah, I have seen people say that, but no, it's just it's just more multi-knight.
I don't know, that makes more sense because there's like an interesting in-universe explanation instead of like, haha, funny fandom joke. I want there to be a story here, you know?
Yeah, the knight simply interacting with the objects in the light world to manipulate the dark world. Yeah. That's just confirmed true.
How fully true was it for Queen, though?
There was a few people who, for some reason, thought that the knight interacted with Queen in the dark world. Like, I saw people say that. But that was confirmed wrong in Chapter 2, when Queen explicitly says that she was just guessing based on the knight's actions. Yeah. That she did not meet the knight or receive orders from the knight at all.
Yeah.
Queen just tells us that outright.
One of the criticism I saw for this theory was like, it would be interesting, but it would have less emotional impact. You know, people didn't like that the knight wasn't actually interacting with the dark worlds and they were just moving stuff around in the light world, you know?
I mean, a big component of this theory was the fact that the knight is explicitly stated to have turned on the laptop before making the fountain, and Chris turns on the TV before making the fountain. Both Chris and the knight performed the exact same actions in regards to setting up their fountains.
A really funny text
response.
I don't think the knight is going through that much effort. Okay, why are they even doing what they're doing to begin with then? If they don't care to make that much effort. This is kind of insane with the new chapters because the plan is so elaborate. There's just so many layers to it.
Yeah.
Of course they would go through this effort.
I mean, like, the knight plan is the same as the standard Chris Knight theory knight plan. Yeah, just like slightly more complicated because there's a Death Knight thrown in there. And we got all the prophecy lore. But the prophecy lore was already there even with Chris Knight. There's just more of it now.
People did seem a bit confused by this theory. I guess I don't know. I guess I just didn't know how to explain them well, even though
I don't think people were that confused. It's pretty straightforward. I think people just didn't agree with it. I think that there's a lot of people who gave it a 5 because they're like, well, this could totally be true, I guess, but like, I don't really think so because I really do think King met the knight because there's a battle like that happened in the throne room. So
that was the thing. I remember that.
You know, people would argue this. So it's like, no, people just didn't strongly agree with this theory, even though it was pretty explicitly stated 100% in chapter 2 that that's what happened, and is also shown to be what happens in chapter 3, or at the end of chapter 2, going into chapter 3, right? And then we get confirmation of it with King as well in chapter 4.
Yeah, there were people that had an understanding of this and liked it. Would tie in the previous elements about how the Dark World works. So yeah. The knight was hiding in the computer lab closet. This is a big controversial theory, a lot of discussion surrounding this one. Pretty similar graph to Chris Knight as well.
Yes. This was a hotly debated theory. It was very confusing and complicated. There was a lot of like interconnected moving parts regarding it. Yeah, even with the new chapters, it hasn't like killed the theory, but also it's complicated. Let's just put it at that.
Yeah, we'll explain it later. Some people might have assumed that this one's just confirmed, but there are other interpretations to the closet dialogue, which we'll mention later, so don't worry if you're aware of those theories too.
The new chapters have more or less confirmed that the knight was doing something in regards to the closet, but what exactly is still up in the air because it's still pretty confusing regarding, the new information we got in the chapters. But yeah, let's roll it back and talk about what the theory was in the context of chapter 2 and stuff that people were voting on in this graph.
Computer lab closet.
Yeah. So the origin point of this theory was essentially that the computer lab closet, when you interacted with it, it would give you the dialogue. The closet is spacious and full of old electronics. A large person could easily fit inside. And that dialogue, pretty much almost on its own, caused people to start theorizing that the knight was actively hiding in the closet and then jumped out of the closet and made the fountain when Noelle and Birdley were already in the room. Primarily, this was only ever really used in terms of theorizing to like push against Chris Knight. Very rarely you would also see people try to justify their candidate and make it better by being like, look, Alvin is the same height as the closet, right? Something like that. I'd see people do. But primarily it was only ever argued in regards to Chris Knight for the most part.
Or even like Papyrus, because of the line he has in Undertale.
Yeah, people would try to use this to boost Papyrus Knight a little bit with Alvin Knight. It was also technically like a Carol Knight debunk, but the Carol Knighters would never acknowledge this. Like, I would see, like, Mayor Knighters who would be like, oh yeah, 100% all in on the Closet Knight. They would never move any ground on it, but would also refuse to acknowledge the fact that it doesn't make sense that the mayor would be able to hide in the closet when the receptionist says that the mayor has not left their office once that day.
Carol would have to be the knight without Closet Knight, which you should do regardless.
The main points of evidence that the pro-Closet Knighters would argue Noelle and Birdley's books being on the table, they would often lie about this point, saying that the books were open, even though they were visibly closed.
I think it came more from misremembering, which isn't great either, but,
Yeah. But primarily it was the books on the table. They would also highlight Ralsei as like a point. He said, I sensed the dark fountain, and then hurried over. So because of the Ralsei point, they would specifically argue that the knight made the fountain immediately after Chris and Susie left Castletown, and that it was made in the window of time between Chris and Susie walking to the school to the library.
I thought he said that stuff because he already knew where the Dark Worlds would appear. Yeah, it was true.
Yeah, that point specifically in regards to the new chapters has been thoroughly debunked.
Yeah.
Now have direct confirmation that he knew about it because he knows the prophecy. It's like he doesn't actually have Dark World sensing abilities. He just knows the script of the game, which was honestly really obvious in chapter 1 and 2 because he says so in chapter 1 and then he flips out in the weird route in chapter 2. So it's very obvious that he had the script the whole time. So I never thought that Ralsei point meant...
Yeah, oh my god, I remember people... when I tried pointing out that it was like in character for him to like not tell the whole truth with the prophecy and stuff, people didn't agree with that it was in character for him.
Yeah, so that was kind of like, there was like one other point they used. They used like Queen saying hell of a study session, being like, oh, that means Queen knew that they were studying but right before the fountain was made. And I was like, okay. This was like a hotly debated thing because when you actually stop to think about it for a couple minutes, you immediately realize that it doesn't make a lot of sense and it's kind of really absurd and contrived. There's like a long quote from like Andrew Cunningham going into how it's like really silly and stuff because people who were like more against the theory would point out being like, if the knight made the fountain when Noelle and Birdley were in the room, why did Noelle and Birdley not react to it? How come they didn't see the knight?
Sleeping
all that
powder.
Stuff. Why didn't they run away? Right?
Sleeping magic.
The point is,
she would have noticed the knight, especially now with how fucking big and they look like a titan.
Yes, that's relevant now, but that wasn't relevant back in the day because nobody thought the knight was going to be a titan, well, except for Death Knighters, but that's here nor there. Because Death Knighters weren't really primary arguing for
I
Closet Knight.
don't
I don't think.
so. I don't know.
The main groups that were arguing for Closet Knight mostly was like the Alvin Knighters and Papyrus
I
Knighters.
don't know.
I
Well,
feel
I mean,
like.
this theory did do positively, though.
But generally was more of a general anti-Chris Knight point. You would argue
Yeah.
this if you didn't think Chris Knight was possible.
And I know some people are probably going to comment about it and be like, no, it wasn't. But, like, just look at the charts of, like, this theory and Chris Knight. They're basically identical, you know? Which makes sense, because this was kind of the anti-Chris Knight theory. The biggest problem with this is that it kind of makes everyone stupid, and there's just, like, everyone involved is stupid. Birdly, Noel, the Knight, and you have the fucking timeline. It gets very squished in. A lot of things have to happen in a really short amount of time. Even in the Dark World,
how the whole discussion would go is that people would push like the original version of it that we already explained, and then people would be like, this, and this doesn't make any sense regarding that. And then the Closet Knight people would then come up with ad hoc arguments to evolve the theory in real time in order to try and keep arguing with you. That's pretty much always how it went. For example, you would point out, hey, if the Knight was like hiding in the closet stuff, why does the laptop dialogue say that the Knight turned it on before making the fountain? Because it does. It says someone left it on,
which relates to the
right.
the video you can find in the mansion of the fountain creation.
Yeah, on top of that, why would the Knight even be hiding in the closet in the first place? Why the hell would they hide in the closet for hours waiting for Noel and Birdley to show up? How would they know that Noel and Birdley were going to show up, right? There's all these things. And so the argument would then evolve into, oh, well, they were setting up the fountain and they were about to make it, but then Noel and Birdley walked in, so they had to hide in the closet for some reason. And then they still made the fountain with Noel and Birdley in the room anyway, and Noel and Birdley just didn't notice somehow. The whole thing is kind of silly.
Some people said that if the fountain was made during the night, the fountain in the computer lab would have been just not seen for too long. It's in the middle of town, in a public building, and nobody saw it.
That's a contrivance, but like that's the same exact contrivance going on with Castletown throughout the entire course of the game. So I don't think Toby like Closet Knight is just absurd, if not more so than like nobody going into the computer lab all day.
But also, Noel and Birdley did enter it. They entered it just fine, you know? Because Susie and Chris, they entered the scary dark room as well. They didn't think that it was going to be like some weird, scary dark world stuff.
Yeah, because again, people would also argue that it's like, oh, it doesn't make sense for Noel and Birdley to walk into a dark room. And I was like, does it? Does it not make sense? I don't know. Like, why wouldn't they walk into it to turn the lights on? Yeah. Like, that's really not absurd at all.
People would say that because they were at the table, they had to have sat down there. But like, Chris and Susie literally moved. They're not standing by the door. They're standing by the table as well.
Yeah.
In chapter 3, the Chris and Susie are at the sofa. And when they enter the dark world, they're at the sofa. Because that's when we get to chapter 3.
How they have affected this theory. Because like the main idea with this theory was that it's like, oh yeah, it was usually was argued with Alvin, right? So let's just put Alvin as a stand-in for any normal Lightner Knight, right? It's like, oh yeah, with Alvin, there's just kind of a level of why the fuck would the Knight be doing this? It's like, why hide in the closet at all? Why not make the fountain before they got there? Why wait for them, or why hide in the closet after they show up, right? There's so many like logical, like, why do this, that it's just like, it just comes off as stupid no matter how you try to spin it. But now we know that the Knight is like this Titan thing. So that kind of changes everything in a lot of ways. And on top of that, we get the chapter 4 closet dialogue, which is basically the exact same, where it's like a large person could easily fit inside, and then Chris doesn't open the door, and it's implied that the Knight is hiding in that closet. So with that, it's like, oh, people are like, oh yeah, Closet Knight is confirmed. But then hold up a minute. If Closet Knight is confirmed, right, the Knight was hiding in the closet, there's still a big issue with that, which is how the hell did the Knight both A, get to the library to hide in the closet in the first place, and then B, leave the library after making the fountain? If we're assuming that it was still when Noel and Birdley were in the room, how did they leave the library in the middle of the day when Undying was standing right outside directing traffic? There would be no way for the Knight to leave the library and get back to the shelter without going past Undying, who would see them. So therein lies the big issue now regarding Closet Knight for the most part. What is my solution to this? How are the Knight, using the closets specifically? They're using them as like fast travel doors.
Yeah, it's one of the new theories. Teleportation Closet Knight.
Teleporting in them, it's basically like Monsters Inc., right? You open the doors, you go in, there's a monster in the closet. That's the trope that Toby is playing off of. That's why he's doing Closet Night, because he thought that was a cool idea, right? There's actually a thematic reason for why Des is a scary monster in a closet,
Yeah,
you know?
also in Des's room, she has her bed placed away from the closet as well.
I cover this in my like big Chris and Dust video, so I do recommend watching that for a more like, you know, thorough breakdown of this theory. I also have an old Closet Night video that you can argue doesn't hold up, but you know, it's like I still think it highlights a lot of the issues regarding Chapter 2 Closet Night.
There are some other points to teleportation Closet Night, like the doors. The doors in Chapter 1 and 2, they teleport you.
Yeah, the teleportation doors. Yeah, the teleportation doors in the Dark World
Yes.
specifically. So there is like an idea of like teleporting doorways and stuff, and now that idea is simply being carried over into the Light World because the Titan guest has like assumably some level of their Dark World powers in the Light World, seemingly. So that's kind of the idea regarding it. There's another point regarding specifically Noelle and Birdley, whether or not they were in the room when the fountain was made. I'm pretty confident that they weren't. There is more new evidence and stuff that they weren't, because when we find Noelle, she's at the start of the Dark World, from the entrance point that we came in from. In Chapter 3, we see Chris and Susie enter the Dark World sleeping on the couch, and then they appear in the Dark World, you know, sleeping on the couch, sort of thing. So where you enter the Dark World from does matter a lot into where you will be in the Dark World. But because of that, that heavily implies that Noelle and Birdley entered the Chapter 2 Dark World into the same entranceway that Chris and Susie did, right? Because you walk through that passageway, and there's like a bunch of battleground on the ground and stuff, and Noelle is calling for help, and we know Birdley was already captured, right, by Queen, and then Queen came back to capture Noelle because she only has one cage. So that means, like, we see the battleground and stuff, it's like Birdley and, like, Noelle were fighting Queen's Darkner army, right, before getting captured. The fountain being made like 5 minutes before Chris and Susie get there and stuff also doesn't line up with the timeline described by the Sweet Captain Cakes, which was another point that people would bring up against Closet Night in the Chapter 2 days. Yeah, Spooky Dude, I remember, was like the one who highlighted it the most.
So, like I've said, the timeline is it just has too much going on too quickly, and it doesn't really make sense with how anyone would act.
So I think you can see what we mean when we say that this is like very confusing and complicated. And I think that's the most annoying part about this whole closet ordeal for me, is that it's just like, you look at it and it's just like, Toby did not need to write it like this. He could have just written it so that the knight sneaks around town in the middle of the night and makes the fountains then, right? Just like how Chris would have been making the fountains, right? Toby did not need to put those closets there. They do not need to exist at all. They don't really add anything outside of the thematic idea of Des being the boogeyman in the closet, but like, she's already a scary Titan thing. We don't really need that. Especially since I feel like that's gone over most people's heads. I'm literally the only person I've ever seen.
She becomes what she fears. She becomes what she fears, basically.
Yeah. You know, it just feels kind of needlessly complicated for no reason, right? Not having the closets and stuff, frankly, would have made the Chris Knight pseudo red herring work better, right? Because if the Queen said last night the knight made the fountain, then there would be no Closet Night debate, right? It would just not exist. And Chris Knight would be a much stronger, you know, theory in the Chapter 2 era if that had happened.
There has to be setup for everything beforehand. It can't just all be pointing towards the red herring.
It's not even that. I actually don't think the closet works well as like Gaster Knight setup, right? Nobody who was arguing the closet was arguing it in favor of Death Knight.
Maybe.
Closet Knight is confusing. Like, even with what we just said, there's still a bunch of stuff that we didn't cover. There were still arguments and points that people would bring up in this debate that we didn't touch on.
Remember.
Right? Yeah, I think because of the fact that, like, it doesn't make sense for how the knight would be able to escape the library in the middle of the day, especially since the knight is like a Titan monster. It doesn't even make sense that they would be able to go out during the day. Like, it feels like they should die from sunlight, like a vampire and stuff. Because that's usually how these shadow monster type things work in fiction, right? They're, like, they're weak to light, they're weak to the sun, you know?
The knight needs darkness to exist in the light world.
Yeah, just state specific likely what I think happened in regards to like chapter 2. I think the knights teleported into the closet somehow, like quote unquote teleported, however they did it. Then they turned on all the computers in the library. Then they made the fountain. Then they teleported out of the library. Then at some point afterwards, Noelle and Birdley entered the dark world through the main entrance. And then shortly after that, Chris and Susie did the same thing. That's how I think
Yeah, that makes sense.
It was made.
There's nothing weird about that.
It explains why closets are a thing without having the messiness of Noelle and Birdley being there.
And just to give an explanation for the closet in chapter 4, at least my explanation is that the knight is in the closet with Alvin because they're trying to kidnap Alvin. That's why Chris doesn't open the door fully. Alvin is a normal lightner and he can't teleport, so the knight has to wait for everyone to leave. And also, we forgot to say this for some reason, but it's very integral. But this theory explains why Chris had to make the chapter 3 Dark World, because there isn't a closet for the knight to teleport to. Because every other Dark World has a closet. The Grand Fountain is the closet. Card Kingdom is right next to a closet. Cyber World has a closet. And the church has a closet.
All that stuff. So yeah, I think that's how it went down. Is it possible that it went down exactly like the old-fashioned closet knight theory proposed? I guess, but like I don't know. I question Toby in regards to it. But again, it is what it is.
I think I would have preferred Mayor Money Tunnels over regular closet knight because at least no one becomes dumb.
Yeah, well, Mayor Money Tunnels is like more or less the same thing as teleportation. It's just
It's not.
a different explanation of the fast travel, right? The point is the doors are being used as a fast travel method to be able to sneak around town in the middle of the day without being seen.
Yeah, I haven't seen it a lot, but I've seen some say that it's not true in chapter 2, but it is true in chapter 4.
It's confusing. I don't know. I'll wait for a more proper explanation. Hopefully, it's not impossible that we'll get a more thorough explanation.
I always found this theory questionable, and I only grew to dislike it more and more.
Again, it's like if you're a bit more confused regarding it, I feel like I explained it a bit better in my Chris and Des video. I have a Closet Knight segment in that video that explains it. So if you're still confused, go watch that video. No,
Yeah.
I think that's about it.
Yeah. Knight going upstairs to hide instead of the closet theory.
Oh, right. This fucking shit.
Upstairs Knight. We'll call it upstairs Knight for simplicity.
This was one of those ad hoc arguments I had mentioned.
Yeah, this is from the bonus survey.
Right, of just like, you point out how it doesn't make sense, and so then they'd be like, oh, well, actually, it happened this way, to try and make their
this is from the bonus
work.
survey, so it has not the most proper results, mostly just a bunch of 5s, a big spike there.
I'm surprised you bothered to include it at all.
But it is kind of different. The thing is with this theory is that it's kind of counterintuitive, because like the whole point with Closet Knight was that, the fountain was made during the day and all that. And this theory kind of removes it.
That's not what this theory is. This theory is Closet Knight happened, and then instead of walking outside into the traffic jam and jumping over the cars, they just went upstairs into the library instead. That's what this theory was. Did you like not understand what the theory was? Because I know exactly what
when
this
did they
theory is,
hide in the fountain? No, when did they hide in the closet?
Before, so Closet Knight happens exactly like how they describe it does, and then instead of leaving the library, they go upstairs and wait for the traffic jam to end and then leave the library.
So they're up there while Chris and Susie are in the room. Okay.
Yes. So but Closet Knight still happened before this, exactly like how it is.
Whoopsie doodle. Because I named it wrong. I'm sorry for the 2 people that like this theory.
It's okay. This was like a non-existent theory. It was an ad hoc argument proposed by one Closet Knighter.
Yeah.
I don't think it.
The reason, that explains why you were surprised by why I put it on there. I put it on there because I thought it was different from Closet Knight. They went upstairs instead. Okay.
No, it's just a slight adjustment of it to try and make it work against one of its numerous contradictions, which is why it's like this is why Closet Knight is so annoying, because like Chapter 2 Closet Knight, as it was argued, has like a dozen contradictions. But Teleportation Closet Knight doesn't. The only thing you have to assume is that the knight can fast travel into closets, but like the knight is like magic and shit at this point.
They can shapeshift.
That's the thing. Old Closet Knight you would need to assume that the night was magic in order to make it even kind of work.
Oh, that reminds me. Some
And
people
so,
thought
yeah.
that the vessel could teleport. I remember people being like, "Oh, that's dumb."
That is true. There was, like, I remember seeing a few people being like, well, what if the knight is teleporting into closets because the knight is the vessel? I do
Yeah.
remember people saying that. And I never really bothered to argue against it because it's like, well, how the fuck could I? Because the main point of my argument against it was like, well, Berdly aren't in the room. It was just like, it's like, how the fuck do I argue against it? And I don't.
Weird. Oh yeah, what about the Gaster follower upstairs though?
What about it? I don't think that has anything to do with anything.
Doesn't that debunk the theory?
No.
They're not always.
I mean, the theory's debunked because it's just,
Yeah, but aren't
like,
they always
wrong.
upstairs? Okay.
No.
Okay. And now, for the next couple of theories, we're gonna talk about like the motivation for the knight. And there were a lot of different ideas here, so I kind of had to put all of them here. Well, I wasn't able to put all of them because people were saying a lot of different things, but this is basically the gist of it. And the main one, the first one, is like the knight wants to cause the roaring. You know, a common point was John Apocalypse. It's in the name. You know, they're called the Roaring Knight, and this one did decently well. You know, there were also some little spike in fives though. I didn't even like this one back in the day because the knight could have caused a roaring at any moment though. And I remember some people saying like, oh, they need to power up again to make another fountain.
Yeah.
It's dumb.
It's silly and obviously is 100% blown. That argument is completely deflated from what happens in chapter 4. This is one of those theories that like makes sense if you're not actually thinking that deeply about the plot. And it falls apart the second you realize that in order for this theory to be true, the entire story has to be an idiot plot where the knight is just a complete fucking moron who's terrible at their job. Who also wants to like end the world, which is just like a really lame motivation to have for a villain like this. It would be dumb. The whole thing is just awful. I could say with confidence that this is now fairly debunked.
It's not true.
If the knight wanted to cause the roaring, they could have done so 10 times over now. They're clearly just fulfilling the prophecy, which explicitly states that the heroes save the world at the end. The interesting component about that, though, is that we don't learn about the fate of the knight in the chapter 4 prophecy, right? We just know that the knight has to fight the heroes a couple times, but besides that, we don't learn what happens to the knight. So it's very, very possible that there's a prophecy panel that Chris and the knight know about that we don't see in chapter 4 that says the knight in the cage lived happily ever after the events of the story, that's 100% possible, and it would explain their motivation completely for why they're doing all the things they're doing,
Good for the shippers. I don't know that.
Well, I don't mean it like that. I just mean that in that they get a happy ending.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Okay, but for these motivation theories, I went through the task of like taking the most popular knight theories, Alvin, Carol, Des, Chris, Papyrus, and Vessel, and like seeing how well did the motivation score for these theories, we don't need to talk about each one individually, but I'll show them. Well, it's kind of a little weird all over the place, but the ones that scored the best was like Des and Alvin. Yeah, it didn't really do that well for Chris. I guess that makes sense.
Because Chris Knighters have enough logic to be like, well, Chris is sealing the fountains with the soul, therefore they're obviously not trying to cause the roaring. Like, most Chris Knighters were smart enough to, like, put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah.
Like, that was one of the main reasons why I was a Chris Knighter. It also makes sense that Death Knight was, like, one of the more popular ones with this, because Death Knight is, like, literally the only one that could have this motivation and it still have it make sense. And then we got Death Knight, and it still wasn't true.
Yeah, that's so weird. Papyrus Knight, it's a little bit, it's like it both did bad and good at the same time, but it didn't do that great anyways.
Yeah.
The knight is making fountains because they want friends, These are like worlds you can escape to. The dark worlds are better than the light world. This one's rated too high. I don't know why it's lower.
It feels like it should be lower because this theory was basically exclusive to Papyrus Knight. I don't think I've ever saw one outside of Papyrus Knight argue for this.
Yeah, it makes the villain dumb. It makes it a smaller threat. Like one text response says, "Why wouldn't the knight stay in the dark world? They could just stay in the dark world, Garbage. Takes the weight off the game." Kind of pathetic behavior, to be honest. Lemeo. Disney ending,
Yeah, definitely doesn't make sense under the new context of the knight having never entered the first 2 dark worlds. I guess this motivation could also work under Susie Knight.
Don't think about it. I'm killing you right now. Okay, but here are the stats for all the characters. Fucking suck balls on Alvin Knight. At least Alvin Knighters understood that would suck balls. Same with Mayor Knighters, same with Death Knighters, same with Chris Knighters. It's a little bit
And
all
as
over
you
the
can
place for
see,
Chris
just
Knight.
like how I said, Papyrus Knighters are the only ones that give it a positive rating.
Yeah, and it shows you that you shouldn't trust this theory or Papyrus Knight. Papyrus Knight had like TV friends or card friends. That was the name of it. That was like the name for like the Papyrus Knight one. TV Friends was like an anti-Chris Knight thing or whatever. Gaster
Yes,
tricked him.
yeah.
Oh, right. People said that Gaster was tricking him because, Flowey did the same in Undertale. You know, it's dumb. Some people like brought up like Chris Knight under this one, like, oh, it could maybe work under Papyrus Knight or Chris Knight. And it just kind of shows a lack of understanding in Chris Knight.
Yeah.
It's not like Chris Knighters didn't rate this one too highly. It's kind of all over the place for them.
Because this is very similar to the argument that anti-Chris Snyders made for why Chris was making the fountain, which is that, oh, they wanted to make the fountain because they wanted to have friends and stuff and go on more fun adventures, right? Like, that was the primary argument that anti-Chris Snyders would give for why Chris made the fountain.
The knight is making fountains to keep the player entertained. This one makes a little more sense than the previous two. And this was like, here's another one that's like mostly big within like one candidate, and it was Vessel Knight.
Yeah, this was primarily like the Vessel Knight explanation. If you adjust the wording, it also kind of works under the context of Chris Knight, because the idea of Chris Knight was, and the sense of what we ended up getting, right, is, oh, the knight is making the fountains with the intent that the player will go through the dark worlds and then seal the fountains. And that doing that will let the knight obtain something else for some reason.
Yeah.
But it wasn't necessarily to keep the player entertained. It was because of that something else at the end that we're not like, privy to yet.
Like finding her or something. For Vessel Knight, it was created to be your entertainment, you know? I remember
taking it
people
very literally, yeah.
Yeah, I remember people complaining about a part in Oblivion Theory, like the game is criticizing you for just playing the game. But, the game kind of condemns the whole fun adventure formula anyways. So, but I don't know, it's not, I don't know, kind of a stretch. For looking at the other candidates, though, it's kind of in the middle for a lot of these. And then for Vessel Knight, it did really well. Look at that. It's like the big thing there. You can see that thing they like.
It's interesting that no Death Snyder gave it a 6, but a lot gave it a 5 or a 7.
Yeah. No, it got 2 6s.
But yeah, you can see here that this was the Vessel Knight one, because all the Vessel Knighters gave it a high score.
Des and Carol had big spikes in 5 and 7s, and then there's like jumps down to 6 and then up again. It's weird. Altogether though, it did kind of do similarly to the Roaring Knight motivation, but a little bit better. They did around the same area. Misguided reason. When I wrote in the summary, like, they've lost themselves and they're like making the fountains because, it's what they think is good and what will be positive to them. It's kind of vague, but it encompasses a lot. That's what I think, at least. And it is the one that did the best, and I think it makes sense why it did, because, like I said, misguided is just vague enough that it could be anything.
If I'm interpreting this correctly, it's essentially the idea that the knight doesn't fully understand what they're doing. In a sense, they are missing information or something along those lines, essentially.
Maybe.
Like the logic is that, like, Alvin believes that causing the roaring will create, like, a paradise for everybody to live in, for example. Like, I saw that theory go around. The goal is to stop him because he doesn't realize that causing the roaring will end the world. As for, like, however you decided to interpret this theory, I think we can confidently say now it has been debunked and is wrong, and that the knight very much clearly knows exactly what they're doing. They understand the prophecy very well, and they understand what they're doing and, like, what will be the end result of their actions and stuff.
Yeah, because when you were complaining about it earlier, it seemed like you were interpreting it a bit wrong, but that's fair. I think this is the one that Chris Knight got the highest one on.
I think everybody scored really high on this. I think everybody kind of thought that this was what was going on for some reason.
It's not that bad. It's not that far off. It's not like, oh, they're dumb and stupid and they don't know what they're doing. Yeah, a common motivation that kind of falls under this, I guess for some, was that they were trying to, like, save Des, which goes into like Carol
That's
and
true.
Chris Knight. And
I suppose that's true. Because that's the thing. It's like the misguided is a very vague
that's what I'm
thing.
saying.
It could be interpreted as like multiple different things. So it makes
Yeah.
sense that it would score highly,
Yeah.
even though it ended up being wrong.
I mean, Chris Knighters did like Chris saving deaths as a theory, and I also
Yes.
checked if Mayor Knighters like Chris saving deaths as a theory, even though Carol was the one doing it. I guess.
Well, yeah, I
even
think
though
to be fair with that, you could theorize it in the regards of multi-night with like Chris Carol working together, which was a bit more of a theory than Des. I think it's just a matter of it feels like something Toby would write in like a lot of people's heads, right? It's like, oh well, that's kind of how Undertale is. Like all the bad guys are just misguided, they're just misunderstood, sort of thing. And people have that thought in their head regarding how Toby writes characters and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of Deltarune was like being set up to be like Undertale-like, only to be like subverted. Look at the first chapter, you have like King, and then King just kind of turns into buffoon
in chapter 4.
That was funny. I don't know. I'm surprised Vessel Knight did as well as it did here, because it's the vessel. Why is it that high? What kind of character motivations does it have to be like?
That is, no, that's true. That is weird. Why would it be like that misguided if its goal was to entertain the player, right? It's like, why would you rate both entertaining the player and misguided like really highly? It's like those two are not the same thing at all.
I guess
it's not misguided to try and entertain the player.
Yeah, I guess it's like, well, being evil isn't guided in the right direction, so I guess it is misguided or something like that. I don't know.
I mean, when it comes to like night motivation, it is still pretty up in the air, and like there's a lot of confusing elements regarding it. It seems like they're primarily just trying to fulfill the prophecy. But the problem with in regards to what they're trying to get out of doing that is that there are parts of the prophecy that we are missing that the Knight and Chris definitely know about. So we don't have all the information that they have. So because of that, it's not possible to fully determine what their motivation and what their thought process in doing all the things they're doing currently is.
Knight makes Fountain for a different reason that's not mentioned here. This one's pretty similarly to the Knight is a new character, except they got a bunch more 5s. I didn't even bother like checking the rating.
No, there's no point.
Yeah, there's no point. Everyone's like, I don't know. It's pointless.
I imagine that you put this on the survey mostly to give people a chance to fill in a response, essentially. This is the write-in one. So with that being said, is there any interesting write-ins?
I didn't exactly look for those, but maybe I'll put them in on the screen when I'm editing.
Yeah, okay, yeah. You find any interesting write-ins that people actually decided to put?
I should have written like a question like, is there a motivation that isn't here that you think the Knight has? Or something like that. That would have been better.
Yeah, that would have been a good idea, yeah.
That would have been too much to look through, but also, whatever.
Okay, since not everyone would have put in a response, it probably wouldn't have been too bad.
Yeah, it seems like people really cared about this aspect of the game, and they had a lot of knowledge. Like, the biggest part of, like, theorizing from, like, the Chapter 2 days. This is literally why I made the survey to begin with, because I was curious about what people thought about the Knight candidates, and then I kind of expanded from that, and now I'm here,
Yeah.
A funny text response was, meet the spy, Team Fortress 2. I know you'd like it. I know you'd like it. Another text response was, Toby knows exactly what he's doing, how the fan base operates. That's Sly Fox, which I guess is kind of true.
I wonder if Toby expected Alvin Knight to be like super popular.
No,
right?
That would be insane.
Did he expect Woody Theory?
Yeah, I think he kind of did. I think he might.
I think he expected it, but he didn't expect it to become this mega meme that took over the entire fandom.
Yeah. Oh, oh my god. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I remember some people saying that Alvin Knight was like a red herring for theorists, which is insane to say. I don't think Toby even considered that people would think that it was just something that happened. Yeah.
Because it wasn't a red herring. People just misinterpreted what he was like setting up.
Yeah.
He wasn't setting up him being the Knight. He was setting up Gerson in chapter 4.
Yeah. For other text responses, people mentioning their favorite picks, and a lot of pro and anti-Chris Knighters and penguins. Yeah, just penguins.
Yeah, because like that's the big thing regarding like anti-Chris Knight and stuff, is that the entire rest of the Knight theorizing space was built on murdering Chris Knight first. They feel like they couldn't breathe unless Chris Knight was dead first.
Yeah.
They couldn't ever just be like, well, maybe Chris Knight is right. Maybe no, it had to die for them to feel,
We talk about this in the other.
Yeah, I'm wrapping it up.
Yeah, we talk about that in the other Knight video where we talk about more correct theories. If you're wondering about where those were, we mentioned that earlier too in the intro. That was good.
Yep, that was good. I'm good with that.
Okay.
You can stop recording now for Betty.
Yes.
Wow, you actually watched all the way to the end. You might be the kind of person that would be interested in a news survey. Yeah, that's right. This time, you get to rate chapters 3 and 4 of theories. Theories like Carol Knight, Neil Woody theory. Well, why did you stop being green? It's in the description and the pinned comment. So I recommend you do it right now. It'll make me very happy. I spent all this time and I made this just for you. If you're interested in seeing more from the survey, then check out the videos from specific categories already out within the playlist, or subscribe for more of these, or other videos. Or you can subscribe for our personalities. I guess that's possible too. Who wouldn't want more of this goat? I already have enough of him. Well, that's it for me. Check out my Patreon, my Ko-Fi, my other art like music, or Chestnut's channel. Okay, see you later. Bye bye.